Let's assume that daylight saving time is to blame. Some people adapt easily to changing times, but I am not one of them. I usually don't have classes until 10 a.m. I'm a mathematics professor at a university, and I don't wake up until 8 in the morning. That Friday morning, I was still suffering from the clock being set forward an hour. I woke up at 6 a.m., 2 hours early because my body clock was going crazy, just in time to see my wife come out of the bathroom and start getting dressed. Mary is an extraordinarily beautiful woman. She has the deepest green eyes that can mesmerize. She is 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighs about 140 pounds. They say she has a great figure. She has 38D breasts and a 26-inch waist. I don't know what the girth of her hips is, but they curve enticingly towards her long legs. I watched as she put on a garter belt and thigh-high lace stockings. A black lace bra was next, followed by matching French panties. Then she put on her makeup. The makeup was light but carefully applied. Then a deep purple silk blouse, buttoned up to reveal a hint of a bra. Finally, she put on a dark striped suit with a skirt that came 2 inches above her knees and a jacket that hugged her body. She was wearing 4-inch stilettos, the ones that were all black but had red soles. As she was combing her hair, she noticed that I had woken up. "Good morning, love. Sorry if I woke you up," she said with a wide smile lighting up her face. "What is the case?" I asked. She shrugged and said, "Nothing special, just a normal day at the office." A fact that doesn't fit into the big picture always piques my interest. Something that indicates that the current theory does not fully explain the facts is compelling. In this case, a lawyer in disguise lying about the reason. Mary and I have been married for 21 years, or will be next month. We met at a state university. The first time this happened was in Math 1. I had to be there, it was a required course. Most of the math students attended an afternoon session with Professor Latham, a local math star. Non-mathematicians preferred Professor Hoffman, supposedly one of the easiest examiners on campus. As luck would have it, 2 days before classes started, Professor Hoffman had a heart attack and was out for the semester. He was replaced by Laura Parker, who has always been my role model as a teacher. I just think about what she should do and do the opposite. One of the problems we face as university professors is that no one thinks to teach us how to teach. Poor Laura needed lessons. There were about 24 students in the class looking for an easy grade from an ailing Professor Hoffman, which clearly wasn't happening. Mary was one of those looking for an easy assessment. I was there because of the conflict. I had already fallen in love with a girl named Margaret, who was an artist. She took an art class during the day, and I signed up for art as well, while my fellow mathematicians were doing Math 1 with the brilliant Dr. Latham. I'm a little arrogant when it comes to math. I'm good at this, and I know it, but I'm bad with women, and I know it too. I didn't stand a chance with Margaret, who soon began dating an unkempt art senior. He created metal sculptures that didn't represent anything, but supposedly said something if you had the soul of an artist. I obviously didn't have one. I think Margaret had one. Rumor has it that he treated her badly, and she liked it. It was hard not to notice Mary. She was the most beautiful girl in school, and that's not an exaggeration. Tall blonde with movie star looks and incredible figure. Guys literally stumbled just to approach her. I had no problem approaching. Laura Parker took care of that. She called me on the first day of class. Laura had an obsessive need to prove that she was the smartest person in the room. To do this, she wrote a really complex polynomial equation on the board and started calling people to solve it. If 2 months of classes had passed, the average student would have had a chance. On the first day, the students were puzzled by this problem. I was her third victim, and I confidently walked up to the board and quickly solved it. I'm good at what I do, and I'm not shy to show it. This is my talent, and I am proud of it. I have trouble reading due to dyslexia, and I come from a working-class family. My father took meter readings for the electric company, and my mother was a nurse. Training for me was a struggle for them. I wasn't going to let this snobby, like Professor Parker, humiliate me. Laura was unhappy with my correct answer. She asked additional questions to show her superior knowledge. I won this competition and became her enemy for the next 4 years. In my opinion, you can live with or without fear. From the second class, I noticed Mary sitting next to me, and she remained there for the rest of the semester. Mary was a grade hunter. This was her approach to choosing courses, and she was determined to get the highest grade in everything. At the time, I didn't know why she was so insistent on achieving high grades. However, she was beautiful and a pleasure to be with. Accordingly, I played along. She received the second highest grade in the class. I had the first one, much to Laura's displeasure, but by then Latham already knew about me. The great Professor Latham was just as smug as Laura, only he had the right to be. I was known as a protege of sorts. Latham pushed me hard because it improved the reputation of his department. However, he was right. I needed it. I had no ambitions. I needed a nudge. After Maths 1 finals, when I saw Mary on campus, we talked. We even shared coffee or lunch sometimes. We were friends, it seemed to me. Like I said, she was a pleasure to be with. If anything, her appearance distracted me from her as a person. I liked her, and she seemed to like me. With most girls, I was so shy that I could barely speak, but with Mary, I could relax. We were friends, and that was it. I didn't see her as someone to date. Mary and I weren't dating, and I thought it would stay that way. But when I was 19 and a junior, everything changed. Mary was then 21, and she was a senior student. At that time, and even today, I like to box as entertainment, without competition, just for fun. So, a guy named Max came up to me at the gym and asked if I was busy on Saturday night. I answered no. Then he said that his girlfriend had a friend, and they wanted to go to some kind of ginger concert. I had never heard of them, but it turned out they were a pretty good rock band. Max said he provides the tickets, and all I have to do is show up and look decent. Well, it was set up in every possible way, but as usual when it came to Mary, I was slow to understand what was going on. I met Max at a local student bar before the girls arrived. When they arrived, my date on the blind date turned out to be Mary. Later, I found out that she organized everything. She wanted a date and was sure that I would never invite her myself. Mary, being Mary, found a way to overcome my shyness. Max and his girlfriend, a very nice girl, soon disappeared, and I was left with Mary, who monopolized the conversation and essentially controlled our date. Mary came at me like a steamroller. She wasn't intrusive. She was just firmly in control of the situation. By the end of the evening, I was infatuated with her overwhelming personality. It just seemed to fit in all the places where I was missing a piece. I don't think she's ever directed her full power at me before. The way she looked at me as if I was something special that she had won made me feel good. We ended the date with a kiss and a promise on my part to call her early next week. She didn't wait for my call. On Monday, she called and said that she would come to study with me. After that, she and I spent a lot of time together. Honestly, I never understood why a hot sorority girl would be interested in a math nerd. After Math 1, she never took another math course, so I was of no use to her as a tutor. I didn't look bad, and I was in great shape. I was 6 feet tall and weighed 180 pounds. Girls liked my blonde hair, but I was too shy for anything to come of it. I wasn't exactly in the league of the girl who was at the top of the list. I couldn't figure it out, and neither could my nerdy friends, but the general consensus was that if a beautiful and rich girl wants you, then why not? It is worth mentioning that Mary was from a wealthy family. She attended a state university to get excellent grades while she studied for her law exam. She wanted to go to Harvard Law School. Mary was a very ambitious girl. I remember the day she received the early admission notice. After we celebrated, she invited me home to meet my parents. This was not what I wanted to do, but at the moment of her triumph, I agreed, believing that they would see me as a temporary hobby. After all, Mary was soon leaving for Harvard, and I still had one more year of study at the university. I assumed that her going to Harvard would end our relationship. The house outside Stanford, Connecticut looked more like a mansion than a home. It had 7 bedrooms and 24 rooms in total. This frightened me more than it impressed me. Mary's mother, Catherine DeVoe Singleton, was 4 inches shorter than her daughter, but she had an equally incredible figure. Her curves were the result of having 3 children. She had the same honey blonde hair and gorgeous deep green eyes as her daughter. She was exceptionally beautiful in her early 40s, as is her daughter today. Catherine received me warmly, and we immediately became friends, which we remain to this day. Mary's father was colder, as expected. He was taller than me and wider, but he carried an extra 20 pounds. His light brown hair was thinning, and he was at least 10 years older than his wife. He looked at least 20 years older than her because his lady looked much younger than her age. Roger Singleton was an insurance agent when he married Catherine DeVoe, heiress to the DeVoe fortune. Catherine had a much older brother, but he barely lived to see her wedding. With DeVoe's money, Roger Singleton seemed set for life. However, he could not resist using them to make himself the head of his own insurance company. DeVoe and Singleton is one of the largest reinsurance companies in the world. They don't sell you a policy, they cover the big risks for those who sell the policies. It's more like gambling. This is a difficult game and requires a sharp mind and strong nerves. Roger Singleton, I learned, was perfect for his business. Roger's life is centered on his company and his family, in that order. The exception to this order was his eldest child. She was the center of his universe and the pride of his life. Mary Singleton came home to tell her father that she had been accepted into Harvard Law School. What I didn't realize right away was that she also told him that she had won a suitable husband. Until that weekend, I had no idea that I was the prize. Mary told my parents about my merits. It turned out that I was chosen for my intelligence and appearance. Mary chose carefully, looking for the right partner who would provide the right DNA, but would not interfere with her long-term plans. When Dad took me for a walk around his property, I was interrogated about my plans and prospects. In my opinion, I had a little bit of both. I was going to finish my undergraduate degree and get my PhD in mathematics. Perhaps I will teach. I didn't think this through. In response to the question of where I would get my PhD, I answered, where the most financial support will be. I had no real concerns about this. I was at the top of my class, which, as it turned out, Mary knew very well, although we never talked about it. When we returned from our walk, Dad left me with Mom and then called Mary into his office. They spent a good 3 hours together until it was time for dinner. I assumed that whatever was discussed, I would be rejected as a suitable husband for Princess Mary. Mary emerged from her conversation with her father with all smiles and affection. I assumed this was her attempt to hide the nature of the discussion from me. Her father, for his part, was polite but cold. Mom was overwhelmed with joy at dinner and treated me like part of the family. When the weekend was over, we headed back to school. I asked Mary what she thought her parents thought of me. Well, Mom fell in love with you immediately and told me so. Dad was a little more cautious, but after talking with you, he believes that you are exactly the man I need and that I should marry you as soon as possible, said she. Well, I like your mom too, but I find your dad's attitude strange. How can I be the one he wants as a son-in-law? Mary just laughed. Jason, you are the smartest man I know, but perhaps the dullest knife in the drawer. You are the brightest son-in-law a man could ask for. That means smart grandchildren. You have absolutely no ambition, which in this case means that I can have them for both of us. If you haven't noticed, I, like my father, am very ambitious. I'm not sure I understand, I said. It doesn't matter, my love, because I understand. The point is, I love you and I want you. We're perfect for each other. So how about this are you going to ask? With these words, she took my hand and squeezed it. In fact, that's how we got married. Mary made the decision half out of love and half out of practical considerations. It was all love on my part, as it should be, because she and her career always came first. We got married in a simple but elegant ceremony over the summer and began our newlywed life in Boston. I completed my degree by taking classes at MIT and redoing credits. We lived in a small apartment, paid for by her father with a small allowance. Just as I graduated and Mary finished her first year at the top of her class, she announced that she was pregnant. How did this happen? I asked. Well, we had sex and, she replied, laughing hysterically at me. I thought, good girl, we were using pills. That was the wrong assumption, she said. I worked 20 hours a week at a gas station and taught math to schoolchildren. Mary studied and became incredibly fat. She missed one semester and gave birth to our daughter, Catherine, named after Mary's mother. Mary then returned to school the following semester. She lost all the pounds she had gained and more. She looked better than before. The next child was better planned, right before the end of her last year of law school. She gave birth to Patricia just in time to take her exams. Mary had 2 children and a law degree. She graduated at the top of her class. She was still the same great hunter I knew. Big law firms are lining up to sign a Harvard Law School graduate whose father was a major insurance magnate. She chose a firm in New York, and we were preparing to move. That's when I decided what I would do. It was obvious that whatever it was, it would involve a lot of childcare. I looked around and decided that working as a graduate assistant while I got my PhD would be the best option. Mary didn't really care what I did as long as it didn't interfere with her career. She always put her career first. My main job, as she made clear, was to take care of my family. She was the breadwinner. Columbia was interested in me, but they had a limited number of places. I would have to compete for a place, which was difficult for me. The interview process was the most difficult for me. You had to sell yourself in the first 5 minutes to have any chance. Nancy Sloan was a full professor and a rising member of the mathematics department. She was also open about her sexual orientation. She preferred women. We were an odd couple, a housewife, a father of 2 children, and a promiscuous gay woman with a reputation for chasing everyone in a skirt. Nancy is short. She is less than 5 feet tall. She compensated for her height with 6-inch heels. She wore men's clothes and had a boyish haircut. I came to the conclusion that men's clothing was an attempt to provoke a reaction. It didn't work for me. I made it clear that I was here for work. She wondered what it was like to take care of 2 little girls. How did I deal with this, and did it interfere with my work and studies? I explained how I arranged childcare, a part-time housekeeper, and a backup nanny. Plus, I was looking for part-time daycare for Catherine now and for both girls in a year or so. I wasn't sure she was convinced. I was about to admit it was a mistake when I noticed an autographed photo of Gail Grandchamp on her wall. "You love boxing," I said. She looked at the place where I was pointing. "You know who she is." "Yes, Gail Grandchamp. She went to court to box in the Commonwealth. Very good, but she was too old when she was allowed. But she did fight professionally," Nancy replied. "Yes, but professional women still have a long way to go." "Do you follow women's boxing?" she asked. "Not really, just what I see in the gym," I answered, and from that moment we began to discuss my boxing. I told her about the people I had sparred with who had gained some notoriety. Nancy hired me and announced to everyone that I was a former light heavyweight who was now a stay-at-home mom. She claimed she was saving me from being seen as just another dumb piece of meat. It matched her sassy approach. Surprisingly, we worked well together, and I was eventually offered an associate professor position. As predicted, she moved up the faculty, becoming department chair and associate dean for arts and sciences. I eventually became a full professor. Mary's career at Harris, Tweed, and Cardigan was even more impressive. She became junior partner after 2 years, senior partner after 6, and the firm is now called Harris, Tweed, Cardigan, and Singleton, although most people simply call it Harris Tweed. As you can see, she also kept her maiden name. She only made one mistake. The birth of our 3rd daughter, Tina, was not planned. Mary had always been careful about this after her first 2 children, but in her 2nd year at Harris Tweed, she decided to switch from pills to something else. She gave her body a rest, as she called it. This device became dislodged, and by the time she noticed it, she was already pregnant. I don't believe she regretted it, although she was very upset at first. I told her that this would not affect her career, and that I would love and care for our 3rd child. Tina turned out to be an amazing girl. She was a capricious baby and a terrible child at the age of 2, 3, 4, and so on. However, after 8 years, she became the most affectionate daddy's girl and the most caring of my 3 daughters. It's hard to believe she's already 15 and so much time has passed. Mary worked long hours in those early years, often 90 or more hours a week. She still works long hours, leaving before I get up and coming back after I do. She left the care of the children and everything that came with it to me. I often got lost. Raising daughters is not easy for a man, but there is nothing more satisfying. As each of them reached an age where they began to assert their independence, I felt a deep sense of loss for each of my little girls. Kate and Pat are in college, and this fall my daughter Tina got her biggest wish to attend Downton School in Westchester, New York. It's an all-girls boarding school with a focus on the performing arts, not what you'd expect from the daughter of a shy, introverted mathematician. But Tina has always been special, and perhaps that is why, despite my efforts not to play favorites, my youngest daughter is the closest to me. I miss her, and maybe that's why I was distracted that morning, trying to figure out why Mary was dressed up like that. I don't have classes on Fridays, only office hours when students can take their anxiety out on their professors. You find yourself more of a consultant than a teacher. This is something that has always made me uncomfortable. I called and took the day off. Then I headed to what these New Yorkers call Midtown, Madison Avenue at 34th Street. Mary's law firm leases 6 floors in a Madison skyscraper between 34th and 35th Streets. I found a window seat in a cafe directly across from the entrance to her building. It was a little after 10 a.m. and I had breakfast: scrambled eggs, bacon, and rye bread toast. I ate slowly and drank coffee until midday when I called Mary's office on my cell phone. Her secretary Janet told me that I had just missed her. She left for lunch and wasn't expected until 2 p.m. At that moment, I saw Mary leaving the building in the company of a tall black man. She held his arm and leaned towards him in a very familiar manner. They reached Madison and turned onto 35th Street. I stood up and followed them. They walked to 5th Avenue, then entered the Gideon Hotel, a small boutique hotel that catered to Madison Avenue businesses and some airlines. Mary and the black man were so engrossed in each other that they didn't notice me following them inside. They headed through the Art Deco lobby towards the elevators. His arm was now around her waist. When the elevator doors were closing, I saw them kissing. I watched the elevator rise to the 12th floor. I sat down at the bar next to the lobby and waited. I ordered a small overpriced beer and sat seething. I knew what was going on upstairs. I just didn't know why. I thought I had a good marriage. I loved Mary even after 20-something years, and in every important way more than ever. I tried to come up with all kinds of reasons for her behavior, from approaching age, related hormonal surges to possible neglect on my part, but I was fooling myself. Mary was in a room on the 12th floor with another man because she wanted to be there, and there was nothing I could do about it. 1 hour turned into 2, and then, around 2:30, they stepped out of the elevator. The porter followed them with the black man's luggage. They headed towards the main doors of the lobby. I think at that moment my patience ran out. I stood up and followed them. The receptionist was loading my suitcases into the trunk of the taxi as I walked out the hotel doors. Mary turned around to kiss this guy on the lips. As I walked through the doors, she apparently noticed me and pushed away, letting out a quiet cry. The black guy turned around to look. Seeing a very angry man approaching, he stepped between Mary and me. He probably wanted to protect her. It was a mistake on his part. I hit him. Luckily for him, Mary screamed, "Jason, don't," and that brought me to my senses. Mary fell to her knees to help him, and as she did so, her skirt rose up. She wasn't wearing stockings. Her legs were bare. If I needed more proof of what happened on the 12th floor, I saw it, and it hurt me. I literally felt pain as if I had been hit. I turned and started to leave. I stood, but was obviously defeated. Mary screamed at me to stop. Several passers-by tried to intervene, but I waved him off and walked up 5th Avenue. When I reached 38th Street, I took the subway. There was only one safe place I could retreat to. I realized that I had been crying, and tears wet my cheeks. I took out a handkerchief and tried to wipe my face when suddenly my mobile phone rang. It was Mary. All it did was make me sad. I couldn't talk to her. The call went to voicemail, but the phone immediately rang again. I was standing on the train platform. The phone was ringing and beeping with voice messages. The metro is not too busy in the middle of the day, but it is not empty. People looked at the crying man with the ringing phone. I gave up and turned off the phone. At this time of day, it took me an hour to get to Morningside Heights and my office at 112th Street and Broadway. Once on campus, I felt some normalcy again. The familiar surroundings seemed to attract me and tell me that everything would work out. I lost my marriage and didn't know what I would say to my children, my mother, our friends. 21 years disappeared in an instant. I might even be arrested. I attacked the creep my cheating wife had spent most of the day with. But as I was surrounded by majestic buildings, I felt my resolve harden. I was going to hold my head high and end my 20-plus years of marriage as a man. The phone in my office was ringing when I entered. I didn't pick up the phone. It was almost 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I wasn't expecting any calls. The call was supposed to go to voicemail, but when I checked the call buffer, it was full. I had 27 messages, the first from a student, the second from the university administration, reminding me of a faculty meeting, both received early in the morning, and 25 from Mary in the afternoon. She called and left messages until space ran out. I deleted them all without listening. At that moment, my computer, which I always leave on in the office, made an email notification sound. It was Mary, of course. To Jason Sweeney at univ.ed. Subject, Jason. Jason, you completely misunderstood what you saw. We've been married for almost 21 years. I deserve a chance to explain myself and defend myself. You owe me this. Please come home and let me explain. I'm innocent. The man I was with, Frank Patterson, is a work colleague. He wasn't badly hurt and understands everything. Everything will be okay if you just come home. I love you. Mary. My answer was short. To Mara Singleton at htcslaw.com. Subject, Jason. They were nice stockings. Does your lover wear them too? Your ex-husband. Jason. I blocked it before sending it. Any additional lies she wants to tell me will sit in my spam mail until I clear my inbox. Just in case, I went to Mary's company website. I started looking through the list of lawyers. Eventually, I found it. Frank Patterson worked in the Chicago office. He was a junior partner. Patterson graduated from Yale Law School in 2003. I made it about 35 years ago. He was 5 or more years younger than me. His photo showed a very handsome guy who looked very confident. This raised many questions for me. Mary has been traveling to Chicago for the past 6 months. Was it not the whole story or not the case at all? They were very close, and this clearly wasn't their first time together. I could have spent hours thinking, but I decided to distract myself with work. Around 8 o'clock in the evening, there was a knock on the door. It was Nancy, my friend and boss. So, Beefcake, what's going on? Your wife called me and said you need to go home right away. She's waiting for you, Nancy said. That won't happen, I replied. May I know why? Caught her leaving her hotel room with another man, I replied. I see the problem, but how does hiding help? She said. I'm not hiding. The marriage is over. I'm working. If I never see that bitch again, that'll be fine, I said. Boy, I knew you had a temper, but I didn't know how bad it was. Look, given my experience, I'm the worst person to give advice, but I would take time to calm down and then talk to her. I know she's a good woman, and maybe she has an explanation. Anyway, if you need a place, Betty and I will be happy to accommodate you, she said. What you need to know about Nancy is that her longest relationship was with Betty, her current significant other. Nancy is slutty. She cheated on all her partners, including Betty, who kicked her out at least twice, as far as I know, for cheating. Thank you, but I would like to stay here for a few days if possible, I replied. Okay, but if you don't have a place by Monday, you're going home with Betty and me, she said. After Nancy left, I tried to assess the situation. I had no money. All my salary went into our joint account. Mary signed the checks. I didn't have a checkbook. I was sure that the first thing Mary would do was block my credit cards, which were all in her name. I allowed myself to become dependent on her because I trusted her. Trusting her, I now realized, was a colossal mistake. One of my quirks is that when I'm sad, I work better. I'm currently writing a book. In academia, it's either publish or perish. For the next 4 hours, I worked intensively on the book, ignoring the ringing phone calls. Just before midnight, I received a text from my daughter, Kate. "Dad, what's happening? Mom says you don't want to come home or answer calls." She's almost hysterical. I've never seen her like this. "You need to go see her now, Kate." I answered, "Sorry, Kate. I will always love you and your sisters. I will always be there for you. Just please don't get involved in this. Your mother is dead to me. We will get a divorce. I won't ask you to choose a side. Just please don't ever talk to me about that woman again. Your loving father." From Kate. "Dad, what's going on? You can't just tell me you're divorcing my mother and not give an explanation. I'm a grown girl. I can accept it, whatever it is. Please give me some kind of explanation. Dear Kate, I'm sorry, but your mother broke her marriage vows. If you want to know more, you need to ask her. I love you always. Dad, love you too. Always, always, forever. Kate." After that, I didn't hear from Kate or anyone else for several days. Hurricane Hugo began as a tropical wave before becoming a tropical depression off the Cape Verde Islands, becoming a rare Category 5 hurricane in the Atlantic. It destroyed the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, then hit South Carolina and continued on to Lake Erie. It was the most destructive hurricane to hit the United States up to that time, September 1989, 6 months before my 17th birthday. I was a carefree, underappreciated high school student. I had no idea what Hugo meant to me. I lived in Connecticut, far from the wind, rain, storm surge, and inland flooding. I came home from cheerleading practice that day to find my mother crying in the kitchen. My first thought was that she had finally found out about my father's infidelities, but she simply pointed to the headline of the local newspaper. "Hugo Worst Storm, 34 dead in us, 10 billion damage." Sun Times, September 23, 1989. Some will say that I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth. If so, then it was a silver-plated spoon. My mother was DeVoe. Rich old family, but she was born when my grandmother was 45. By the time my mother was 10, Grandma DeVoe had early-onset Alzheimer's disease. Her father was an alcoholic, which left her in the care of her 30-year-old brother, Jackson Chamberlain DeVoe, who was something of a financial genius. When she was 18, my father, Robert Singleton, came on the scene. I think he fell in love immediately. Back then, he was little more than a glorified insurance agent, having started life as just another poor boy from East New York. Dad was smart, ambitious, and successful. Being a man who doesn't take no for an answer, he was an excellent salesman. I think for my mom, having my dad in her life was like someone opening the curtains and letting in the sunlight. It took some time before she learned that my father had several flaws. He was an incorrigible gambler, except for the fact that he cheated on women. I didn't realize how bad it was until Hugo turned my world upside down. My father was in his office, the curtains drawn against the fading daylight. The room was lit only by a low-wattage table lamp. Dad was sipping whiskey, unusual in a house where spirits were frowned upon, a legacy of my mother's upbringing or lack thereof. "Dad, are we broke?" I asked. He simply smiled and put his finger to his lips, and that's how he played. We're not broke if people don't know we're broke. It was then that I learned the difference between insurance and reinsurance. Insurance companies are large, powerful institutions that sell policies to the public, controlled by government agencies with cash and securities in reserve to pay claims. The laws and the system are tilted in their favor, and they rely on spreading the risks. Reinsurance is how insurers transfer risks that are too large to be fully distributed. Reinsurers do not sell to the public. Therefore, they are less regulated. They sell to insurers and don't pay unless the loss is very large, but the risk is also high. These are smaller companies and often more profitable. However, the policyholder will only go bankrupt if he breaks the rules, cheats, becomes stupid, or is simply grossly incompetent. The opposite is true for the reinsurer, who depends on every business risk and what are clearly the acts of a cruel god called calamity. Hugo was a servant of this god. Big, powerful, and ruthless, Hugo moved inland and caused catastrophic damage to all types of businesses, individuals, and governments insured by insurers who would turn to reinsurers like my father, Roger Singleton. How he got the money to cover the losses I will never know, but a shadow darkened my hitherto bright home. It left me deeply affected. Mom stopped crying and put on a smile, and my younger siblings, John, who was only 10, and Susan, only 6, never noticed that their world had almost collapsed. My mother was strong, much stronger than I ever knew. She lived on the edge of a smoking volcano and ignored the ash and heat. I'm not that strong. I took a serious look at my life. I realized that I was living under the illusion that my life would always be safe and comfortable. I was a bad student and had no ambitions before. Now I wanted to regain that safe and protected feeling that I had lost. I was always attracted to boys who, like my father, exuded confidence and cockiness. Tito Jefferson was a very tall and handsome black guy. This lasted 6 weeks. I liked sex. I was on pills. The next guy lasted a little longer before we broke up. I also slept with him. My current boyfriend was a tennis player, a little older, 19. I haven't slept with him yet. I was not a woman of easy virtue who simply took off my pants at the first opportunity. The guy needed to work on it and show some respect. The problem was that I didn't see either of them as life partners, or, more importantly, as someone I could turn to in times of need. I decided that I needed to learn to be independent and provide for myself. I am a strategist by nature, so I developed a plan. I'll get into a good college. An Ivy League university was rejected because of my poor grades, but I decided to change the situation. I will attend a state university and then, based on my college grades, attend a law school, preferably an Ivy League. Since then, grades have become everything. Once I made my decision, I strictly followed the plan. There were some hiccups along the way. Once I carefully planned for my college math requirement, I researched the syllabus. You could take the course Math 1, a very difficult course. You could take statistics, not as difficult, but still a challenge, or principles of mathematics, known as mathematics for dummies, an easy choice, but with a pitfall. Math for dummies would not look impressive on a transcript, and the teacher was very strict in his grading. So the trap was an easy course, but a difficult a grade. On the other hand, one of the Math 1 teachers, the horny old Professor Hoffman, was known for his easy grading. He especially favored beautiful girls with good legs and short skirts. My goal wasn't to avoid work. I wanted to achieve success. My choice fell on Math 1. A lot of work in a short skirt and a solid grade of A. As Robert Burns said, the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. In this case, my plans were ruined by Professor Hoffman's illness and the selfish bitch who replaced him named Laura Parker. She was absolutely the last teacher I would choose for any course. She was not only strict in her grades, but also a terribly bad teacher, smart, but not talented. As I sat wondering what to do now, Laura tried to humiliate her students by demanding a solution to a seemingly impossible problem. What options did I have? Drop Math 1 and take Math for Dummies, which would have been a double whammy with a failure mark on my record and a possible B grade for the replacement, or try to get past Laura. While I was thinking about this, she called a handsome guy sitting at the back desk. I noticed him when he entered. He had devilish good looks with a tall, athletic figure, but he was painfully shy and just didn't fit my dark alpha male type that I liked. I had seen him on campus the past few days and correctly assumed that he was a freshman, fresh out of school, with no clue about life. He walked to the board at the front of the class with that awkward yet graceful walk. I know it's a contradiction, but he was so shy that he looked awkward. But his body had a natural grace of movement. As he began to speak, this beautiful, clear tenor sounded. We sat fascinated while he calmly explained how he solved the problem. He literally pushed Laura back, as if she was retreating from him while being burned. The bitch was about 5'5", but she was standing on 15-centimeter platform shoes that were at least 3 years old. He was still tall enough to look down at her, and the more she spoke in her high, squeaky voice, the dumber she looked. This was clearly not his intention, but the subject came much easier to him. There was no need to say that you were in the presence of a true mathematical genius. He also had a talent for explaining his thoughts clearly. I decided to stay close to this guy at all costs for the rest of the semester. During our second session, I was sitting next to him, so close that I was almost sitting on his lap, and that's when I discovered 3 things. First, what happened in the previous lesson was not an accident. He was the smartest man I've ever met, but secondly, he was absolutely clueless. There is no other word that would describe him better. He didn't understand the world around him. He was puzzled by the opposite sex. And lastly, he had the most beautiful blue eyes. I thought about the line from the Carly Simon song, "The sky is a blue you've never seen in your lover's eyes," and I realized she was wrong. I saw this color in his eyes. Of course, he was not my lover and could never be. He just wasn't my type, but still those eyes went straight to the center of my soul. Long story short, I got my grade and found a dear friend. Jason Sweeney was his name, and he was everything you could want in a friend. Loyal, caring, and willing to help, such as by providing a few hours a week of math tutoring and help studying for a final exam. We remained friends for almost 2 years. We shared coffee in the student union and sandwiches on the lawn. I knew he would be hungry because he usually forgot to bring lunch and skipped breakfast entirely. I tried to repay the favor in kind, because I didn't like to just take and give nothing in return, but it wasn't always easy. Jason attracted a certain type of girl. I could go into detail, but suffice it to say that the word nerd completely described them. He was, as I said, painfully shy and awkward around my sex. It had to be a disappointment because getting him to ask him out was simply impossible. He would never dare ask a girl out, and the girl would never be able to convey the appropriate message of her availability to his slow-witted mind. The nerdy girls were just his request, but he didn't see it, so you could see them circling around him like vultures, waiting for their chance. They weren't all bad-looking, but they were girls in too long, unfashionable skirts or loose jeans with out-of-date glasses and fat frames. To them, poor shy Jason was the equivalent of a rock star with his sharp mind and handsome face. They didn't always look kindly upon the frat girl who interacted with their alleged victim. I've received my share of looks that promise retribution in the dark alley to come. One of them even came up to me and told me straight out that I should stick to my circle. Deep down, I couldn't blame them. No girl who looked like me would ever go after Jason, and they certainly would never be able to attract the guys I dated. I didn't like to admit that I let these guys take me away in their bed on a regular basis. I was not a woman of easy virtue, but I was still too experienced and sophisticated for such sweet, innocent guys as Jason. So I backed off and only intervened when I thought my friend might need help. Probably everything would have remained that way if my father had not intervened again. The summer after my junior year, he took advantage of me and got me an unpaid but highly valued summer internship at a prestigious law firm on Wall Street. When they say Wall Street, they were actually located on Madison Avenue, just north of the Empire State Building, in a glass skyscraper on the 51st, 2nd, and 3rd floors. The place was impressive. The people were classy and witty, but a pleasure to work with. I fell in love with this place and this profession, and I immediately realized that this was my life. I just served coffee and sometimes lunch. I spent more time at the copy machine than anywhere else, but I interacted with men and women who regularly practiced in the superior courts and some of whom argued before the Supreme Court. I could only imagine what it would look like on my law school application, and as always, I made friends. There were no problems with men, a little flirting, that's all. Women, as I expected, would be more difficult, but I was wrong. They accepted me as a sister. It was still a male-dominated profession back then, and the women, who were never called girls, let me know that they had all been through what I was going through. They were ready to help and give advice. No one did this more than Claire Solo, the only female senior partner, although there were several female junior partners in the firm. She made it clear that she would be my primary mentor and would not tolerate anyone else in that role. Claire was in her 50s, but still retained her stunning looks and great sense of style. I looked at her with admiration and soon began dressing in the conservative but sexy skirt suits that she preferred. She always wore jewelry, be it a pearl necklace or a pair of teardrop diamond earrings. She always had an element of chic, whether it was Prada shoes or a Gucci bag. Claire was never short on good advice. You have the looks and the sexiness, don't be afraid to use them, but let the boys' club know that you have a mind they should be afraid of. Never give anything away for free, but don't be afraid to take everything they offer, except their lustful bodies. Be a lady, but keep a stiletto in your trick bag just in case. She was full of advice, and it was good. She had reached the top of the slippery ladder that was her only career advancement at a large national law firm. Outside of the office, I lived in an apartment in a Brooklyn townhouse. It was on Henry Street, just north of Atlantic Avenue, with its Middle Eastern markets and trendy restaurants. It was a revelation to my mother, whose DeVoe cousins had two daughters renting an apartment there while they pretended to volunteer for some charity. In fact, they spent the summer chasing men. There were many men this summer, but none were worthy of more than one night, and most did not live to see the morning. I loved New York and loved working for a high-end law firm. What people complained about was actually what was attractive to me: long hours and big egos. You felt like you were participating in important events. I was hooked and everything was perfect. I had stars in my eyes and didn't notice the dirt under my feet until the last day of my internship. On the last day, the women left early to have drinks with me. It was Friday, and the next day I was planning to take the train home to Connecticut. We left at 4 o'clock and went to a small, cozy bar called Ivanhoe. It was dark and relatively quiet inside on a late summer Friday night. We drank and talked about women's affairs and exchanged promises to keep in touch. By 7 o'clock, it was just Claire and me. I had nowhere to rush, and there was no man I wanted to say goodbye to or ever see again. I felt depressed about men after a summer spent with arrogant, uncaring macho men. They were fun, but completely useless. Claire drank a little too much. She became sad and started telling me about her 2 failed marriages and the children she never had. By 8, she was crying into her martini glass, explaining how lonely life can be if you are not prepared to play second fiddle in a pair. I saw another side of Claire's life. I admired her all summer, and now I felt sorry for her. By 9 o'clock, I put her in a taxi and took the subway to Brooklyn, a very upset young woman. The next day, on the Amtrak train, I pondered my fate. It seemed like I only had a choice between unattractive options: entrust your destiny to some man or go through life alone and lonely. How unfair this is. A different type of man was needed, one who would be fun to be with, who would not have an ego that squeezes the air out of life. I needed someone who would never see my career as a threat to him because he was a true friend. Someone you could rely on to help and support you. Someone who would be loyal, caring, and always there when you need it. Someone who would be good like Jason. When the thought of Jason crossed my mind, my heart began to beat faster. I never saw Jason as a potential husband, but when I thought about it, I realized that no one could be better. I also realized that I had been in a relationship with Jason longer than any other man. Realizing this, I realized that life without Jason would be poor. Then I realized that I had left him surrounded by girls who just wanted to get into his pants. It was like leaving your wedding ring on the bathroom sink. You're just asking to be stolen. I urgently needed to return to university and win my man, which was easier said than done. My parents were supposed to drive me back to university late Sunday evening with my things for the upcoming school year. On Saturday evening, I was on edge. I couldn't wait to get back to university, even though I had no idea what I would do when I got there. On Sunday morning, my mother announced that we would go without my father. This was not common practice. She had already packed her car, a 1992 Volvo 960, with my things before I woke up Sunday morning. The 960 was Volvo's newest model that year and a tank on wheels that handled like a gazelle. She was absolutely reliable and could withstand almost anything. Mom was very proud of her car. She announced that I would drive the car to the university and she would drive home. As soon as I got behind the wheel, the interrogation began. I still don't know how she found out, but somehow she did it. Who is he? What are you talking about? The boy who makes you want to come back so much. Why does it have to be a boy? Because it is, so tell me. His name is Jason. He's very smart, and I just realized yesterday that he's the one. The same one. Yes, he's special. I just didn't realize it before. I was so stupid. My mom smiled and then frowned. What will he think about what you've been doing all summer? What do you mean? DeVoe girls aren't just sluts. They're chatty sluts, too. You're a big girl, and I know you've been with men for a while. You had a good time. What will he think? I laughed. It was so funny. Jason didn't even know we were together, and he certainly would never have guessed what I did over the summer. Mom just looked at me, and then I explained about Jason. How he didn't know that I wanted him, and was too shy to ask me out, and was generally completely clueless. She thought about it and said, "So he's more like this machine, a brooding woman's version of her husband." I smiled. Then she asked, "Do you love him?" "I think so. I want to be with him. He's good to be with. He's not like the others at all." "But he doesn't turn you on. It looks more like a Volvo than a Ferrari." "Some women are more turned on by Volvos," she said. The conversation became more about how to get Jason, and Mom had some good ideas. The blind date was her idea, and it took me 2 whole weeks to organize everything. When I was doing this, I found out that he was interested in boxing, which seemed interesting to me then. A rather strange hobby for Jason, who absolutely does not fit into the mainstream. It's one of those things that makes him lovable, but not sexy. Well, I set my traps and got my man. I never regretted it until recently. My Jason was the best of men. He has never let me down. He was the best husband and a great father. No man could match him in any of these categories, in my opinion. However, 2 problems arose in the marriage. The first is my ambitions. The second is my sex life. I gave birth to children early. I understood the problem that a woman faces in a large company. If you get pregnant as a junior partner, you will never become a senior partner. If you wait until the senior partner, other difficulties will arise, both medical and professional. So I had my girls while I was in law school. Jason, the wonderful man that he was, took charge of the children. When I finally started working, I kept my family apart. My colleagues knew that I was married, but they had never seen my husband or knew about the children. Being married with no visible husband made me an easy target. Influential men love married subordinates. If you are tempted, you will not tell for fear of your own marriage. At least that's what it seemed to me in the first year, when I tried to fight off advances. I was doing pretty well until one late evening in Jack Cardigan's office. He was one of the firm's partners and head of the litigation department. He looked like $1 million. He was 45, only a year older than I am now. Every woman in the firm was in love with him, including me. We worked late into the night preparing for the trial. At the beginning of the evening, there were 3 of us: Jack, his first mate Vincent, and myself as a junior member of the team. I rotated through departments of the firm until I was admitted to the bar. I passed the exam the first time, like all the assistants in our company. The day after I took the oath of office, I was appointed to the Cardigan team. It was a prestigious appointment. Vincent disappeared around 7, but we continued to work. At 9 o'clock, we took a break. We're almost done. The plan was to take the next day off to rest before the trial began. Tonight, we worked through all the loose ends, including working through Jack's opening statement, which he had been making for the last hour. I was in awe of this man. His presentation was great. "What does your husband think about these late nights?" asked Jack. "Oh, we've had a lot of late nights like this in our 5 years of marriage," I replied. "What does he do?" He teaches. Let me guess, that makes you the primary breadwinner. Yes, but I want it myself, I replied, perhaps a little defensively. No offense. I see you as a strong, independent woman who knows what she wants and takes it, he said. Yes, I married a good man fully expecting him to put my career first, and he does so without complaint, I said. I see. Well, you're definitely not the first ambitious woman I've worked with, he said. All the women here are ambitious, I replied. True, but not all of them are beautiful, and some of them have less understanding husbands, he said. Oh, am I wrong? It seemed to me that I was attracted to you, just as I was attracted to you. I understand the caution. Relationships at work are always a problem, and with a senior partner, they can kill a career. But I have never taken advantage of my partners in this way. I have an agreement with my wife. We are both private and happy in our affairs. I pride myself on leaving friends on good terms, like Karen Lane from Probate. Me and she lasted quite a long time, and after it was over, I insisted that she become a partner, he said, his eyes holding mine, hypnotizing. I knew about Karen Lane and a few others. There are no real secrets in companies like ours. The rumor mill is in full swing. Jack was, I realized, a cautious man. He asked if I was ready and if I saw any problems, personal to me or in our professional relationship. He told me not to worry about his wife or my career. From what I heard in the office, I could trust him. I wanted to trust him. The very thought of the two of us in bed turned me on. I got up from the chair I was sitting in and walked over to him. He hugged me. We kissed. My husband is slow-witted. The last thing I need to worry about is a problem with him. But how are we going to do this? I asked. Leave it to me. Meet me at the Gideon Hotel tomorrow. I'll have a suite for us, he said. 16 years of infidelity began and ended at the Gideon Hotel. Jack was the first. We had a great year of pure sex and fun. He was a great person to talk to. A better-than-average lover, he knew how to please. The problem was that he was a little impatient and I was careless. I took the pills for 2 years. My doctor and I decided I needed a break. I was going to stop taking the pills and try something else. There was a bit of a delay with the installation, and I ended up using the aperture temporarily. There were no problems with Jason. He was patient and happy with what I was giving him. Jack was different, demanding, and in a hurry. Accidents happen, I suppose, but when I found out I was pregnant, I was pretty sure it wasn't Jason's baby. Any doubts about paternity disappeared when the blondes with light eyes had a dark-haired, brown-eyed daughter. Nobody said anything. Jason was blind as usual, or was he? I almost believed he knew, but he refused to accept it. When the little girl we named Tina became her father's favorite despite being our most difficult child, I thought he knew and he would make up for it. However, as the years passed and they became so close, I had to wonder. The problem child became a teenage angel. My other girls hit puberty and became terrors. Tina became diligent and responsible. The boys who were caring for her were pushed aside when her dad appeared on stage. She would do anything for Jason. He just had to ask. The opposite was doubly true. I watched as he tried to hide how much he preferred his Tina. Sometimes I felt like the third party in a love triangle. However, this happened before. What is my situation now? Frank Patterson was the latest in a long line of lovers. With the exception of Jack Cardigan, most of them lasted only a few months. Jack and Frank were good books for my career in extramarital sex. Jack was my mentor. Our relationship blurred the lines between the physical and the professional. I became friends with his wife, Anne. They were happy to learn about my pregnancy. They had no children. Our daughter Tina is Jack's only child. The Cardigans came to our house just to see her. It was hard for them, I saw it. They wanted a child, but had to make do with the crumbs from Jason's dinner table. They were good people and didn't let their desires ruin Tina's life. In recent years, I have organized summer vacations for her at their ranch in Montana. It was after her last summer vacation that Tina returned home with the firm intention of going to the boarding school that Anne had once attended. The Cardigans insisted on paying for the tuition, a fact I hid from Jason. Frank Patterson was pure sex. We met during my trip to the office in Chicago. We dined with a group, including the client, but by the end of the evening, it was just Frank and I left. There was no doubt that I would bring him to my room. He was several years younger than me. He was a model of male beauty, good in bed and out of it. However, as a lawyer or a man, he left much to be desired. We had intense sex for the first time. We soon found excuses for my trips to Chicago and his trips to New York. This continued for 4 months, but gradually faded away. Between Jack and Frank, I chose who I wanted, at least 2 new men a year, and most of them combined work and pleasure. If a man could help my career and was attractive, he passed the first selection. The second selection was often more difficult. Everything had to be without obligations and without waves. I loved my husband and needed my reputation. My affairs were undoubtedly a source of gossip, and I'm sure my older daughters knew. I suspected that Jason knew and was pretending not to notice, but as I said, he was slow-witted. Anyway, what has changed today? That lie this morning was stupid. Even white-collar workers began to practice casual Fridays. Asking why I dressed up on Friday was a reasonable question. If I had taken the time to give a good lie, would things have been different? Was Jason acting out of anger at being taken for granted, or had he learned of my years of infidelity? I was amazed to see him approach as I was saying goodbye to Frank. He looked so angry. Frank turned to protect me, but he fell instantly. Frank was wounded. My first thought was to help the injured man. Jason walked away, leaving us. People tried to stop him. I'm glad no one else was hurt. My self-preservation instinct kicked in, and I asked the hotel doorman to help me get Frank into a taxi before the police arrived. I took him to the hospital. As I helped him into the emergency room, he asked a question. "What's happened?" he asked. "You ran into my husband," I replied. "Weakling?" he asked. "Why do you think so?" "Well, I mean, considering." It became clear to me what people must think of Jason. I naively did not realize that my actions would affect him. The emergency room, fortunately, was not too crowded. The doctor who examined Frank took an X-ray and stated that nothing was broken. He suspected a concussion and advised that someone stay with Frank until the morning to make sure he was okay. I put him up in a hotel near the airport. I rebooked his flight for the morning and asked the junior staff member to stay with him. We told the employee that he tripped while getting into the taxi. I'm sure he didn't believe us. I called and texted Jason every 10 minutes. He responded to my first email. I tried another casual lie, and he immediately put me in my place by asking what happened to my stockings. I didn't wear them because they got dirty. They were in my bag when I left the hotel. Suddenly, my slow-witted husband became all observant. I either had to stop lying or be more careful with what I said. Around 7 in the evening, I returned home to an empty apartment. I started to realize that Jason wasn't coming home. I started to panic with anxiety. I was worried about him. He was clearly in pain, and I didn't know what he would do. I called his office multiple times, but he did not answer. I called his boss, Nancy. She is a good person and has a lot of experience in dealing with jealous partners. I told her I was looking for Jason, and he wasn't answering. I said we had a misunderstanding, and he left angry. She said she would check his office and call him back. When she called back, the news was disappointing. "I think you have a problem, Lucy," she said. "How bad is it?" "He's not angry, he's furious. Says he never wants to see that bitch again. Never heard him use that word before. Tell me he's at least okay." "Seems physically fine. He's working, but mentally, I'm not sure. Give him the weekend. He says he'll stay in the office. I'll check on him before I leave and have the night guard keep an eye on him," she suggested. "Thank you. I appreciate the help." I called my eldest daughter. As for Jason, she was my second daughter, right after Tina. For obvious reasons, I could not involve Tina in this moment. "Catherine, this is your mother." "Oh, what's wrong if you're calling me Catherine or calling me at all?" "It's your father. He hit someone." "On a bicycle?" "No, with your fist." "What? Did Daddy get into a fight? Well, not really a fight. A friend got between me and your dad, trying to protect me, and your dad kind of knocked Frank out. There was a long pause, and then she said, "Is this the black guy you're sleeping with?" "How do you know about this?" "A classmate saw you with this guy in Chicago. Said he was tall, very dark, and attractive. Let's just say I know your taste in men." "Well, apparently I crossed some kind of line for your father, and he won't talk to me." "I think it's about finally getting caught," she said. "Here's the thing. I'm not sure how much your father knows or what might have angered him. I need you to do some reconnaissance so I'm not flying blind," I said. An hour later, Kate called. "Mom," Kate said, "am I doomed?" "I think maybe. He said something about marriage vows and divorcing you. I don't think he ever knew, but I don't know what he knows now," she said. "Will he talk to you, or better yet, to me?" "With you. I'll say definitely not, and he warned me not to get involved. I think I'll wait a day or two and call to see how he is," she said. "Probably the best policy under the circumstances. Look, if he calls you, let me know," I said. When I hung up the phone, I just cried. What else was there to do? I have many shortcomings. I'm greedy, ambitious, and depraved, but I love my husband. I think in the end I was slow-witted. I was too stupid to understand what my desires would ultimately lead to. Saturday night, I came out of my fog. My mind cleared enough to appreciate my situation. My job is to solve problems and teach others to do the same. From Friday evening until Saturday, I just worked. I tried not to think about my situation. I managed to distract myself until I regained control of my emotions. On Saturday at 19 o'clock, I realized that I was hungry and tired. I haven't eaten or slept since early Friday morning. It's time to take stock. Checking my wallet, I discovered that I had $40 and a credit card in my wife's name, which I had previously only used for emergencies. You see, I trusted my wife completely. She managed the money. My salary went into her account. Every Friday night, she gave me money for the week's groceries and our small expenses. By Friday, I had just enough left to pay for the pizza dinner I had planned. Friday is a down day for us. I realized that this was why there was a feeling in the back of my mind that something was wrong with the way Mary dressed. I think I already knew what she was doing, and I just needed to convince myself. Well, self-flagellation will not solve the current problems. I had no money and no place to live. First of all, I needed money. The student union was open, so I went there to check if the credit card was still working. I withdrew the maximum amount of $500 and bought a hamburger for dinner. Then I went to the notice board to see who was looking for roommates. It wasn't the best time of year. Most people had already arranged everything, but there were still a few new announcements. I made a couple of calls and scheduled appointments for the next day. There was satisfaction in the fact that I was working on solving my problem. Monday came all too quickly, and Nancy kept her promise. I had several offers to live together, but none of them were ready to move. I'll have to go home with Nancy. The department secretary kept leaving me messages that my wife had called. I ran a few errands. I first opened an account in my name at the credit union, and then went to the office building to transfer my paycheck to the new credit union account. This was supposed to take 4 weeks, but they agreed to immediately stop the current direct deposit and give me paper checks until the new direct deposit went into effect. I have been a long-time member of the Midtown Boxing Gym. It was a fairly modest and traditional boxing club until the boom in boxing lessons as a training option began. Now he occupies 2 floors in a skyscraper. One floor was almost completely occupied by women who were taking lessons from pumped-up men who couldn't stand even one round in a real match. Manny Silverman, who has run this place since time immemorial, is a philosophical old man. "The way you kill that sack, Professor, you'd think he did something to offend you," Manny said. "I thought the point was to hit him hard," I replied. Manny chuckled and raised one eyebrow. "When a great technician forgets everything he knows and just starts beating as hard as he can, he's not training the body," Manny said and left. I stopped. He was right. I needed to get my head back on track. I was just going through the motions. I needed to focus on the rest of my life, the new single life I had to deal with. By Wednesday, I had survived 2 nights at Nancy's. She and her friend Betty lived in a house in Riverdale. It was a nice place with a great guest room, but Betty smothered me with her concern. Nancy goes after anything that wears a skirt. Only current students are prohibited due to university regulations. Betty understood my pain and tried too hard to help me get through it. What was least helpful was their belief that somehow Mary and I would work things out. Returning from Wednesday morning class, I found my mother-in-law waiting in the hallway outside my door as if she were in her 20s. "Catherine, what are you doing here?" I asked. "I came to visit my beloved son-in-law," she replied. Stephen Fitzgerald was her other brother-in-law. He was an interesting man, a lawyer, but not at all like my wife. They say he practices criminal law and is very good at it. There is something strange about it that makes it difficult to understand. I knew that Catherine only tolerated him because he married her daughter, but otherwise felt as awkward around him as I did. "What can I do for you?" I asked, as if I didn't know the real reason for her visit. "Come with me to lunch and we'll talk," she said. She was dressed as if she were going for a walk around the city. She was wearing a dark blue suit with a long skirt below the knees and a bolero. The white blouse was decorated with an emerald necklace. The necklace didn't match the rest of the ensemble. It cost a fortune. When worn to a formal event, it was a conversation-stopping accessory. It was completely out of place in the hallway of my modest office. A waiting limousine took us to a cozy Italian restaurant. Sitting in a secluded booth, she moved on to the topic she had come for. "Can you at least talk to my daughter?" "Sorry, I'm not ready yet." "Okay, take your time, but forgive her and get back to her." "I'll probably forgive her eventually, but I don't think we can continue together. I don't see how this could work. I thought about our life together in the light of new knowledge. I'm starting to think that the guy I hit was the last one in the line, and I don't even know where the line starts, but it certainly hasn't been since last Friday," I said. "I came because you and I have the same problem. We married singletons. They are not true. It's not part of their character. But I love my husband, and I know that he loves me. Mary loves you more than her life, but she doesn't have it in her to be faithful. I wear these emeralds when I know one of my husband's lovers will be at a party or event. This is the gift he gave me to buy my love after one of his more famous romances. She was a movie star. She has long since disappeared from the scene, but my emeralds remain. I have them, and I have a man. It still hurts, but I have my pride, and he paid the price. They are very expensive. I also have a price. I want the life I thought I had. Can Mary give it back to me?" Obviously, she can't erase the memory of her past mistakes, but wasn't it the good things you had together that made your life? The love you had and created together, that home and family you shared together. You're going to turn your back on your family. How will I get my pride back? What can your daughter do to bring her back to me? There's no way she can give it back to me. How do you know if you don't give her a chance? She cuckolded me, and you can't put that genie back in the bottle. Are you going to throw away 21 years of marriage over a word? Yes, I said, standing up. Sorry, Cat, I lost my appetite. Jason, please wait, she called, but I had no intention of returning. This began a series of attempts by various parties to intervene. By the end of the 3rd week, I was going crazy. Then I got lucky. Professor, can I talk to you? She said. Of course, I replied. Colleen Dreyfus was a senior student. She was 30 years old, a little old for a student, but like many other young women, she had served in the army. Her red hair and prominent freckles suited her first name more than her last name. She was a tall girl, over 6 feet, and was not thin, but not fat either. She looked more like a defender than a cheerleader. Well, you know, there are rumors that you're having problems in your marriage, and maybe you need a place to stay, she said, the last words slipping out of her after a slow start. News travels quickly. Yes, I'm looking for a place to stay. Colleen had been standing at the door to my office. and now she was fully inside. You see, I lost my roommate and desperately need a replacement, but there are some problems. You see, there were 4 of us. The 2 are a couple, and they share the master bedroom. This is a 3-bedroom apartment in Sunnyside. They are gay girls, just so you know. The 3rd girl dropped out and returned to Kansas. We didn't quite split the rent between the 4 of us. You see, the girl who left and I paid 2/3, and the couple paid the rest. It was a good deal because we each had our own room and paid $1,000 a month plus utilities. I would have been shocked by the price of an apartment in lower middle-class Queens if I hadn't already looked and experienced price shock. What do your friends think about being next to a man? Oh, it was their idea to ask you. This is Sally Hyder and Karen Snell. I remembered both. They were employees of Nancy, my boss. Not friends in the traditional sense, and certainly not potential love interests. Nancy liked women who were at least vaguely feminine. They seemed strange neighbors to Colleen and even stranger to me, because I had always believed that they belonged to that minority within a minority that hated the other sex. Are you sure? Because it seemed strange that these 2 wouldn't mind having a male neighbor. Colleen couldn't look me in the eye. If I agree to this offer, I need to know that they won't be a problem, I said. She didn't want to answer, but she did. They know everything about you, how you raised children and did household chores so that your wife could have a career. They say you're not like the other boys, more like one of the girls. Well, here it is, everything is on the table. Cuckold and weakling, that's my problem. I gave in to a strong woman and lost her respect because I stopped being a man. I agreed to this offer because it was good. They didn't need a deposit because the girl leaving had to leave one. I wrote a check and got a furnished room, a feminine furnished room, but a place to sleep. Anyway, when I wasn't at work, I started going to the gym. Mary, I was really in a complete mess, and I had only myself to blame for it. That doesn't mean I wasn't angry at Jason. If only he would be reasonable and let me make amends, the whole problem would go away. Mom returned from lunch with him in a very depressed state. He wouldn't listen, she said. What did he say? Basically, you ruined his life, made him a cuckold, and he suspects that the current guy is not the first. Then he left me. I think he understands the situation well, but he can't come to terms with it, she said. What should I do? My advice, based on personal experience in his shoes, is to let him be alone for a while. But don't let up the pressure. Maybe when he sees what life can be like on his own, he'll come back. Loneliness is a great persuader, she said. 2 weeks later, I had lunch with his boss, Nancy. She invited me. Well, he moved out of my place, she said. Oh, where did he go? I got a share in a 3-bedroom apartment in Queens. I'll give you his address. However, don't tell him where you got it from. I know you're his friend, not mine, so thanks for your help, I said. Just looking out for my own interests, can't let Jason go somewhere else. Oh, he'll never do that. He loves Columbia and is working for you, I said. Nancy started laughing. You don't understand, do you? I just shrugged. I had no idea what she was talking about. Jason is the most valuable member of my department, but he is paid the least. He is the jewel in the crown of the mathematics department. Any school would have grabbed him in a minute. Some would have paid him twice as much as we did. But he could also go into industry for 4 or 5 times what we pay. Nobody came because they knew he had a rich wife who was locked up in a big job in Manhattan. Local schools didn't want to rock the boat, especially since money wasn't a factor for Jason. However, now that news of your breakup is starting to leak out, the vultures are circling, she said. You mean he could have gone off and done it for a lot more money? You think? I started crying, despite myself. Events were going against me. I needed to do something. I just didn't know what. It's funny how you live in the city most of your life and see so little of it. This place in Queens is called Sunnyside, and it's right across the East River from Manhattan. It must be less than 5 miles from the apartment we own. The house was not particularly impressive, 2 floors with 2 apartments, one on each floor and a double entrance door on one side of the building. I rang the bell for the top apartment. Buzzer opened the outer door. I entered and was faced with a steep staircase to the second floor and a voice from above. "Hi, how can I help you?" "Yes, I'm looking for Jason," I said. "He's out now, but he's usually back by 7, said a voice from above. "Who is this?" said the second voice. By this time, I had reached the top of the stairs. Standing in front of me were two women with short, boyish haircuts. They were both shorter than me and desperately needed makeup. They are not traditional, there was no doubt about it. "Oh, she's the wife," said the more masculine and stocky of the two. The other took a step back, as if I had some contagious condition. "Can I come in?" They stepped back from the door and allowed me to enter. A few minutes later, I was sitting in a living room furnished from a thrift store and looking like a student apartment. My host sat across from me, looking at me with something between a smirk and a grin. Introductions have been made. Sally was taller and more feminine, while Karen was shorter and decidedly masculine. Sally offered a treat, and I took a glass of mineral water. The door opened, and a very tall and beautiful red-haired girl entered. This girl was clearly feminine and proud of it. "Oh shit, what is she doing here?" said the newcomer. "She's waiting for Jason," Sally said. "Mrs. Sullivan, I'm Colin," the girl told me. "Nice to meet you, Colin," I replied. "Do you think you should be here?" Colleen asked. "I just need to talk to my husband." They didn't know what to do. They were too polite to kick me out, but they clearly knew Jason wouldn't be happy to see me. We spent an awkward 20 minutes staring at each other until the door opened and Jason walked in. He looked great. He was fitter and more attractive than any middle-aged man had any right to be. I knew that I missed him, but at that moment my body and soul felt a longing that was truly strong. Just the sight of him made my heart skip a beat. "Jason, Please, Mary, just go," he said. "Not until you talk to me. Give me a chance to explain," I said. The rest of the room was silent, just watching with interest the little drama we were playing out. Jason was an abused husband, and I was a fallen woman, begging for his compassion, but it was not there. "There's nothing you can say that will change my mind, except that your continued lies are only making our lives more difficult," he said in a practiced tone. Well, at least he thought enough about me to plan his opening line. "Then please give me a chance to tell the truth. So it won't help you, but at least it will give us closure after 20-odd years. We owe the marriage at least that, don't we?" I said, having my argument ready. He sighed, realizing, I think, that I wasn't going to leave quietly and that I had a point. "We owe each other the truth after 21 years. "Okay, but not now and not here," he said, recognizing that we had an interested audience. "Okay, when and where?" "But soon," I said. "Saturday morning at your place. I can pick up my bike at the same time," he said. "Very well, Saturday morning in our house," I said, not wanting to let him give up our shared home so easily. I stayed until the stairs and the door of that student apartment. I ignored the piteous looks as I walked away. Was I really that pathetic? These women, who in their best days haven't a fraction of my appearance, intelligence, or wealth, could now look down on me because in my stupidity I had lost what should be the most precious thing in a woman's life. I lost my husband's love. Even those two understood what a great loss I had suffered. My death would have been easier. On the way home, I thought about the deal I had just made. I rode an elevated train to think. I made a deal with the devil. Jason demanded that I tell the truth, and I agreed to provide the truth in exchange for listening to him. I suddenly remembered Oscar Wilde's novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray. If I reveal all the ugly truth, how can anyone love me? All the makeup and designer clothes can't hide who I am. Like some soap opera TV bitch, I will be exposed as a mean woman of easy virtue that men have sex with. All the superficial beauty, all the trappings of success, and all my wealth cannot give me the one thing I desire, Jason's love. However, I will try to get it with all my abilities. Trains run slowly after rush hour, and I was in no hurry, so I got home by 9 in the evening. A surprise was waiting for me, my daughter Tina. I lied to her, telling her that everything was working out and that her father would be home soon. I begged her not to call or contact Jason. As far as I knew, she complied. "What are you doing here?" I said. "I had to come. This concerns me most of all." "Kate admitted the truth when I threatened her," Tina said. "What are you talking about?" "That Daddy left you and probably won't come back because he finally caught you with another man," she said. I burst into tears. All the pain I was in came out. She said it so simply. "Jason got me, and he's not coming back." Tina, my 15-year-old daughter, hugged her crying mother. She allowed me to breathe out all my pain before delivering the heaviest blow. "I'll tell him about myself." "What? You cannot," I begged. I called Uncle Jack. He agreed, and he got me off school for the next week due to a family crisis. We all agreed that it was time to voluntarily reveal the truth, since we could get caught anyway, Tina said. Uncle Jack and Aunt Anne were what we called the Cardigans. Jack was her biological father. She was Jack's only child, and he had secretly acted as a father figure to Tina for years. Somewhere along the way, she learned the truth. I understood this, although neither she nor I ever spoke about it. No, I can bear everything else, but not this. It will hit Jason too hard. I would rather die. I'm sorry, but I have to tell him the truth, and Uncle Jack says only a blind divorce lawyer wouldn't notice that two blonde-haired, blue-eyed parents couldn't have a dark-haired, brown-eyed daughter, Tina said. At that moment, I felt bad. There was almost nothing in my stomach, since I had not eaten anything all day, but what was there spilled onto the carpet. Tina put me to bed, and I think she cleaned up the mess. After that, she lay down in bed with me, put a cold cloth to my forehead, and told me new facts about my existence. Dad needs to know the truth. The time for lies has passed. What is done cannot be undone. If we reveal everything, we have a chance. He is the best man any of us have ever known. Of course, no one ever had a better father. I need to tell him that I love him when I reveal the truth. I know it will be like a stab in the heart. This is the worst thing you've ever done, Mom, but I love you for it. As Uncle Jack says, you had a choice. You could have been safe, but you chose to give me life. You gave him and me the greatest gift that can be given life. We love you for that, and our deepest desire is to help Dad understand that he is still my father, and I love him. Oh, honey, I don't know why I deserve you or how I can do this for you, I said. It's not for me, you should do this. I hope you can restore your marriage. Uncle Jack, Aunt Anne, and I agreed to do everything we could to help you. But we need to be honest and make it clear that Dad is my real father and Jack will never be more than what he is now, she said as she considered how she was going to handle this. I had a very mature daughter, and I wondered how much of that maturity came from the difficult situation I put her in. We slept together in the queen bed I bought when we first moved into this 3-bedroom apartment. My parents gave us this apartment for my graduation from law school. I was in our family home and our family bed. This was my place and Jason's. This was the place where we raised our children, including a child who had a different biological father. The bed and apartment had so many happy memories, now ready to be completed. It was wrong, and it wasn't fair to Tina or Jason. They were innocent. The fault was mine. I should suffer, not them. I made selfish choices. I slept with other men to get ahead, and because of the pleasure it brought. Like my father, I took risks. The only question is whether I can get through losing like he often did. When I woke up the next morning, Tina was gone. It was well before 8 in the morning on Friday. Exactly 3 weeks have passed since that stupid lie that destroyed my world. However, I also knew the truth that I had ruined my life through my actions. I had to put my world back together. I put on jeans and a simple sweater and went to the office. But I didn't do any meaningful work when I got there. I knew where Tina went and for what purpose. Jason. It was Friday again. It seemed like a long time had passed since that fateful day when my life changed. Mary came last night. She looked thinner and tired. My heart ached from it all, and I was conflicted about the next day. I agreed to meet her and listen. Of course I wanted answers, but I knew they would be unpleasant when they came. My daughter Tina was waiting for me outside my office. She looked terribly gloomy. She had never been a child who smiled much, but the funereal melancholy of her current appearance was painful to bear. "Oh, T, please don't be so sad. Your mother and I still love you and always will," I said as I saw tears begin to form in her eyes. She wiped them with her hand and said, "I promised myself I wouldn't cry, but I can't help myself." I took her to my office and put on some coffee. I sat with her on the sofa while the coffee was brewing. I took her hand and said, "I know what happened to your mother and me is difficult, but please do not. I have something to tell you, and I ask for your forgiveness for myself and everyone involved." She didn't give me a chance to answer and continued. "You are my father and the best father a girl has ever had, but you are not my biological father, Jack Cardigan is," she said, looking me straight in the eyes. "This is a strange fact about people like me. We are highly intuitive and exceptional problem solvers, but are completely unaware of what is happening around us. The world could be constantly shrouded in fog." It took a moment for her words to sink in. The first thing I noticed was how formal and prepared she sounded, more like a lawyer, more like Jack Cardigan than my daughter. It hit me hard when it hit. I let go of her hands and, perhaps for the first time, looked at Tina and really saw her. This dark-haired, brown-eyed girl was shorter than my other daughters and only resembled her mother. She sat there saying another man impregnated her. "Please say something," she begged. The problem was that I had no words to give her. Even worse, my mind, now in possession of such an important revelation, began to fill with facts. It was like solving a crossword puzzle when one long word was solved. The puzzle was not completed, but the meaning of individual riddles became clear. How long has my wife been unfaithful? The answer was most or all of our years of marriage. Tina was over 15, so probably at least 16 years old. Who else was she with? Well, Jack Cardigan for starters, and of course, now that you know, the memories come back of colleagues and clients who were too friendly. All those times she was on business trips and the nights she worked late. There were little bits of conversations that seemed strange and words that now had a second meaning. Jack and his wife took Tina on a summer vacation. They gave overly generous gifts to my daughter. Only she was not my daughter, she was his. "I want you to know this doesn't change anything," she began. "Oh, but this changes everything. My life was a collection of lies told to me by those I loved. How long did you know? I'm sorry, I tried to be the best daughter I could." She stopped and started crying. The stale speech seemed to be lost. We sat there, the young woman was crying, and the old man, and I felt very old, dying as the blood of his heart leaked out. I don't know how long we sat, caught without words that could resolve the growing distance between us. We were both victims here. The only difference was that one of us knew and the other was a fool. I pulled myself together enough to hug her and tell her I would always love her, and then I got up and left. She didn't try to stop me. She couldn't. The facts emerged, and the solution was obvious. Mary. Around noon, I received a message from Jack. It was just a text message saying that Tina had gone to his co-op apartment. He had a luxurious apartment on the west side overlooking Central Park. He and his wife had a room there for Tina. When I called, Ann Cardigan answered. "She is all right. I guess it didn't go very well," Ann told me. "Did she say anything I need to know before I talk to her?" "If it were up to me, you would never speak to her again, but you are her mother, not me." "Sorry, Ann. I know it was difficult for you from the very beginning. I doubt you know the pain I felt when I couldn't give my husband a child. However, Tina was a blessing straight from heaven. Of course I was jealous, but is it hard to be very jealous of a woman of easy virtue who has sex with men to get ahead? In a way, I started to feel sorry for you, but I also resented you for keeping Jason in the dark. It's strange, isn't it, that it was Jason who kept Tina from getting closer to Jack and me. If there is one good thing about this situation, it is that there will be no more pretense. I feel sorry for you because if there is justice, you are going to lose everything that really matters in life. I'll tell Tina you called," Ann said and hung up. At that moment, I desperately wanted to talk to Jason to comfort him and make amends. But there was no way for him to talk to me. However, tomorrow, I hope, it will still be there. He knew the most damning thing I did. Maybe if he could forgive that, the rest would be forgiven too. Saturday at 10 o'clock in the morning, the bell rang. I was on my feet for several hours getting ready. I looked good. I was attractive but respectable in a Swiss dress with white sandals. It was a gorgeous morning, and the sun was streaming through the windows. This is what made you love this apartment, the way it caught the morning sun and the moonlight in the evening. It was a large apartment with a great view of the city. In today's market, it was untouchable in price. It was only in my name, like most of our things, but that wasn't an issue today. I told myself that our marriage does not end, it begins again. As I turned from the windows to the door, I passed a new Trek cyclocross bike. Most men play with engines. My man loved his pedal bike. His current bike was a beat-up old Fisher. They were called cross bikes because they were between a street bike and a mountain bike. They were perfect for the rough streets of New York, strong and durable like a mountain bike, but light and fast like any racing bike. I was replacing a used Fisher that had seen better days with a new version. I chose the most expensive option, and it's not just the price. You can wait years for these bikes just to buy one. I was proud of myself for finding the perfect gift, practical, personal, and with a truly thoughtful quality in the giving. I waited, hoping he would use his key and enter. The camera monitor at the entrance showed that it was Jason at the door, but he made no attempt to open the door for which he had a key. With a sigh, I stepped forward and opened the door. I didn't let him inside right away. Standing in the doorway, I began by discussing the terms. It was a tactic that often worked. Start negotiations with negotiations. Get an initial advantage and use it. I know it sounds cold, but in a very real sense my life was on the line. Can we start by agreeing that this is still our family home and that we will give each other a full opportunity to make our case? I asked. No, I'm tired of lawyer tricks. You can say whatever you want as long as you tell the truth, and we'll leave it at that. All I want from this place is my bike. This is your house, not mine, he said. I didn't like it, but I was beginning to realize how weak my position was. He came in and sat down. Would you like breakfast? I have eggs, bacon, and waffle batter, I offered. No, but some coffee would be nice, he replied. I will bring it now. The coffee was already ready. I just pressed the button. I returned with a mug for each of us. I knew how he drinks coffee black and without sugar. He took the mug. It was the same mug he always used. No matter what he told himself, this was his home and remained so for more than 17 years. I waited and hoped that he would start talking, but he was silent, so I started. I want to start by saying that I am very sorry, but of course, this word does not cover everything. I paused, trying to catch at least some sign of understanding on his part, but there was none. I continued. What I did is usually unforgivable. I understand it. However, I hope that that special person I love can look past their pain and find forgiveness in their heart. I know you want the truth. Yes, I had an affair with Jack Cardigan. He was my mentor at the firm. I was young, ambitious, and not very smart. I was also spoiled and selfish. I got pregnant. The easy way would be to get rid of the pregnancy. However, no matter how hard I tried, I could not bring myself to do it. I don't regret the decision to have a child. Tina is a wonderful young woman. I can't regret it. I suppose I should have confessed my sin back then, but I wanted to protect you. I knew how much pain I would cause if I told the truth. That's why I was silent. And everyone except the cuckolded husband knew, he said with obvious bitterness in his voice. This is wrong. Jack and Anne knew from the beginning. Over time, some others figured it out. Tina is a very smart girl, so she found out at some point, but I'm not sure when. Last summer, she blackmailed me, hinting that she knew. However, I don't know exactly when she found out the truth. If I can get my bike, I'll leave. Why? I am not lying. You're glossing over the truth. Your older daughters know, as do your parents, your sister and her husband. How much longer, I can only guess. You may believe it, but I don't know it. No one ever told me about this except those I mentioned. Perhaps not directly, but there were cryptic comments that make sense now that the truth has come out. Perhaps, but answer me this. Would you rather have a world with or without Tina? You know the answer, but you don't see that my world won't have Tina. She is Jack's daughter. That's just not true, I said. You already agreed with him. He takes her on vacation and gives her gifts. I suspect he has it now. It's just not reasonable. Jack has no children. He is a good man who only gets crumbs from your table. He's the bastard who seduced my wife and got her pregnant. He left the heavy parts for me, just as he took the cream for himself. This didn't go the way I had hoped. I needed to turn it around. I understand, but Tina loves you. She wants you to be her father, not Jack. Don't hurt her because of me, and don't hurt yourself because of your anger, I said. Are you finished? No, I just started. Don't you want to know the rest? Is there more than your fornication in the last 17 years? Did it start earlier? Are all the girls mine? I needed to take a deep breath and hold on to the sharp response. It was turning into a fight, but one that I needed to lose. He needed to hurt me, and I had to let him. Very calmly, I said, Jack was my first infidelity, but not my last. If you want to know everyone, I will provide a list. But they meant nothing to me, and they had nothing to do with us. Kate and Beth are your daughters. I planned these pregnancies. I know I didn't ask you, but I knew you wouldn't leave your children. That's why I got pregnant, to be sure of you, I said. I never admitted this even to myself. I was very insecure in my marriage. Men like Jason don't marry women like me. The fact that we were sitting here now having this terrible conversation was clear evidence that I didn't deserve my husband. I started crying, despite my decision not to. Save your tears for your next husband. Where's my bike? I couldn't believe he had become so tough, but when I looked at him more closely, I saw that he was suffering. His pride said one thing, his heart another. I bought you a new bike, I said. I want the old one. Please take a new one. Give me this at least, accept the gift. Sorry, but I don't want to give you any ground. I'm leaving for California soon, and I need my bike. Where is he? Are you leaving? Took the job at Berkeley after Tina left yesterday. I saw no reason to stay here with my bad memories. I'm starting the spring semester. My heart broke. He was leaving me, and not only me, but also his family. Jason, how can you do this to girls? I understand your anger at me, but why at them? He stopped and turned away, and I knew he was crying. This cannot be changed. I need to leave, and I can't accept that they knew and never told me. Maybe in a year I can come back and visit. They are now young women. They don't need me anymore. It is not true. They need you much more than they need me. They depend on you emotionally. Tina will be crushed. Well, she can turn to Jack, and there's always a phone number. I'll come back for my bike another day. Please prepare it. With that, he stood up and was out the door before I could stop him. Jason, what the hell were you thinking? I heard Manny Silverman yell at Charlene, his assistant. She was a large black woman. She boxed as a heavyweight and was deadly in the ring, but in that moment she wasn't intimidating. She cringed. Manny came up to me. Listen, Professor, this dumbass signed you up as a sparring partner. You don't have to do this. I'd rather you didn't, he said. Charlene asked me to help as a sparring partner since they were short of heavyweights. As a light heavyweight, I was an acceptable sparring partner for larger men. Since my courage has been under attack lately, I agreed. I didn't want to look like a weakling and a doormat and a cuckold. I'm quite capable of sparring in the ring, I said. Nobody said you weren't capable, but you're not right in the head right now. I don't want anyone to get hurt. You have always been technically the best fighter I have ever seen, but you lacked fire. Now you have too much fire for my taste, he said. I'm sorry, if anyone wants to get in the ring with me, I'm not going to back down. Just warn them that I have changed and become a real man, I said. Manny walked away shaking his head. It was that time of year when the summer charity boxing tournament for Wall Street workers was approaching. It was a big show and raised a lot of money for a children's summer camp. There were big bragging rights on the line, so the participants wanted to practice. This meant the need for sparring partners. There weren't enough people in the upper weight categories. Many Golden Gloves liked to earn some extra cash. However, there was a problem in the upper scales. That's why Charlene asked me to become a sparring partner. Unfortunately, she asked about it in front of the other guys, and I could see them looking at me, asking if I had the guts to actually get in the ring against someone. Manny was right. With my current state of mind, I was in danger. You can't fight if your ego is in the hole. I was trying to prove that I was still a man, and that was the wrong approach. I could have gotten hurt, but I couldn't back out now. Maybe no one will choose me. It was Thursday evening, around 5:30 p.m. A guy named Anton Shivas signed up to spar with me at 18 o'clock. He paid a $300 fee for a full hour. The club received $100, and I was entitled to the rest. I hadn't been in the ring for a long time, and I was a little nervous. I arrived at the gym at 16:30 and started warming up. It felt more like a fight than a sparring. Two of the regular assistants volunteered to help, and they gave me a standard 16-ounce glove, a little lighter than the 18-ounce gloves I'd been training in. I had just warmed up enough to relieve the tension, and by the time Mr. Shivas showed up, I was fairly relaxed. Anton came with his retinue. With him were two white men, typical stockbrokers, and one black woman. She was wearing low heels and a professional woman's dark business suit. She was a real beauty, and she knew it. There was also a white woman. This one was very beautiful, even beautiful, but older, late 30s. The rest were in their 20s. It was the white woman who struck me. She was well-dressed, like your average socialist mom on a date. She had short blonde hair and beautiful green eyes, like a certain prostitute I knew. She wore the standard set of engagement rings and diamond rings, like most married women. Shivas was a dark-skinned man with distinctly Western European features. He was an extremely attractive man and kept his hand on the socialist's waist as if she belonged to him. He was a tall and powerfully built man who treated an obviously married woman like property, an alpha male demonstrating his dominance by taking what belonged to another. No doubt the poor husband was at home taking care of the kids while mommy was having fun with Shivas and his gang. Just another gullible cuckold who was taken advantage of. Shivas was talking nonsense as he entered the ring. "Hey, old man, are you going to take a few rounds with me? I hope I don't tire you out before I get my money." He was a young guy, maybe in his mid to late 20s. He moved a lot. I saw Manny walk to the edge of the ring, shaking his head. "Remember, this is just sparring," Manny shouted. Anton was a good boxer. He had some movement and could hit. I barely touched it and didn't hit it much. Something turned on inside me. All my nerves disappeared, giving way to cold anger. I lured him, allowed him to tag me and make mistakes with his punches. Manny criticized from the sideline. "Keep your hands up, Anton. Keep an eye on him, for God's sake," Manny shouted. "Come on, old man, show us something," Anton began. I struck and he fell. Two men tackled me from behind, and Manny ended up next to Anton Shivas lying on the mat. However, the black woman smiled secretly. People were screaming and fussing around. I heard Manny say, "He's alive, thank God." "Damn, less than a minute. They talk about being beaten," someone said. Paramedics eventually arrived and took Anton away. His retinue left in shocked silence. The black girl gave me a discreet wave as she left. Manny was furious with me. "What were you thinking, or can you think? You could have killed him," he said. "Sorry, I thought I was fighting a man, not a coward," I said. "Get out. You are suspended until you prove to me that you are in control." Manny was angry, but I felt like the guys were proud of me. I only wished it was Frank Patterson with Mary observing. This would teach them a good lesson. Mary. On Monday, I woke up early. As a named partner whose name not only appears above the line on the clerk's side, but in the firm name itself, I had the luxury of taking time off at my own discretion. The problem was that I also had the responsibility of making sure everyone else got paid. I was head of litigation, the least profitable sector in most years. This year, I was going to change that. We had a large product liability claim where we represented the manufacturer. The fees generated promised to be large, and the number of employees involved promised to be reasonable. Basically, at this point, we were doing electronic discovery, extracting every email our client ever created. It sounds like a big task, but I learned a few years ago that if you get the right technicians on board, everything can be done quickly and easily. My task for the day was simple. I only needed to get the client's officers to direct their subordinates to cooperate with our employees and the tech firm we hired. One of the interesting aspects of my work was the protocol. My staff did the actual discovery work, but only I could talk to the client's senior bosses. So my morning was spent meeting with my staff to make sure I was conveying what we needed to the client. The doorbell rang just before I was about to leave. I opened the door and saw in front of me a plump man in a tired viscose sports jacket. "Mr. Jason Sweeney," he said. It was unmistakably the bailiff, and all I could think about was that Jason had filed for divorce. "Don't you mean Mrs. Jason Sweeney?" I said. He quickly glanced at the papers in his hand. "No, Mr. Sweeney, please," he said. At that moment, my mind began to work. Someone sued Jason. If I had said that he no longer lived here, the fat man would have gone to look for him elsewhere. If I accepted the documents, I would find out who is suing Jason and why. "I'm Mrs. Sweeney. Unfortunately, Mr. Sweeney is not at home right now," I said. The man looked at me suspiciously. I realized that my striped business suit indicated that I was a lawyer, and this confused him a little. He's probably wondering if he can trust me, I thought. He seemed to have decided that it was possible. "Here, please tell him that he was given the documents," he said, handing me the papers. "Just a minute," I said, opening and quickly scanning the papers. "Don't you want my full name for the affidavit of service?" He hesitated and turned around, giving me a strange look. "I'm Mary Sweeney. I'm 5 feet 10 inches tall and weigh 138 pounds. And guess how old I am?" He smiled and looked at me carefully. 30. "Flatterer, I'm 44, I said. "Well, I have a hard time believing this. But can I ask a question? Why are you helping like this?" he said. "Because, as a wise man said, the opera is not over until the fat lady sings, or in this case, until the fat man delivers," I said, closing the door on a very puzzled bailiff. I walked into my office like a thunderstorm on a hot summer day. I was like heavy rain with the promise of a whirlwind. I quickly dealt with the client's affairs as best I could. I flirted, persuaded, and threatened until I got everything I needed. Then I retired to my office to plan. I was looking into Anton Shiva's lawsuit against Jason Sweeney and the Midtown Gym. I had just called my insurance agent when Jack Cardigan walked into my office. "We need to talk," Jack Cardigan said. "Can I wait a minute? I have a call with the president of United General Insurance," I said. Jack was not happy with the wait, but remained sitting in my office. My secretary told me that she had the president of Yugi on the line. "Simon, it's so nice to talk to you," I said, then exchanged pleasantries with one of my dad's old friends about his family and mine before getting down to business. "Listen, the reason I'm calling is because you have my family umbrella policy, and it appears my husband is being sued for an incident at a sporting event. The thing is, I don't want you to do this. I would like you to hire my firm, and I will cover any costs and fees," I said. Simon was ready, but a little curious. I told him it was a matter of principle. I think he didn't believe it, but I assured him that I would send the necessary documents. Jack sat and listened. I could see his curiosity growing. "What's happened?" Jack asked when I hung up. "I think my husband broke someone's face," I said. Jack sighed. "That's what I wanted to discuss." "I called Jason to see if there was anything I could do to make amends," he began. I raised an eyebrow, and he looked at me sadly. "He basically told me he would be happy if I killed myself to spare him the trouble," Jack said. I think I really underestimated his reaction," I said. "Do you think he could be dangerous?" asked Jack. Well, the answer to that might be to find out what happened to Mr. Shivas, I said. It only took a minute to get Dennis Hoop of White, Branch, and Cooper on the phone. He was a young assistant and very respectful when speaking to the named partner. He filed suit on behalf of Mr. Shivas. Dennis, it's so good to talk to you. Simon Willard from Yugi asked me to call and find out if this Shivas v. Sweeney lawsuit is real. They insure Sweeney, and well, they suspect it's some kind of troublesome lawsuit, I said. I assure you, this is very real. That gym allowed Mr. Shivas, a promising young stockbroker, to get into the ring with an unstable professional boxer, Dennis said. That's not what I was told. Sweeney is a 42-year-old teacher, unlikely to harm a larger, younger man like Mr. Shivas, I said. I was testing the waters with my statements about size and age, but I had a feeling, and Dennis didn't deny it. Let me tell you, I have witnesses who will say that Sweeney boxed like the white Muhammad Ali. He practically broke the face of poor Mr. Shivas. Another one of yours, yes? Well, we went to college together, so I can say he was a very handsome black man before that maniac got to him. Well, it doesn't matter how old 30 makes him. He was fighting a much older man. Is Mr. Shivas weak or very fragile? Well, no, he's 6'4" and maybe over 200 pounds, but Sweeney was a pro. My sources say no, not even a dedicated amateur, but I think all this will come out during the investigation, I said, telling him to wait for my answer, and hung up. Why such a big smile? Asked Jack, who was waiting patiently. It appears that Jason got into the ring with a very large young black man and caused him considerable harm, I said. I was worried he might be dangerous, Jack said. Yes, but now I have him in my ring, and I intend to make the most of it, I said. Look, the reason I came is not really about Jason, Jack began. I got a strange call from your mother. About? Yes, she invited me to tea in Connecticut, but there was something more than just an invitation in her voice. It was more like an order. She was very formal. I mean, I've known her for years, and I'm rich and socially important enough to know what some people are saying about her. Since she is your mother, perhaps you are not aware. My mother was more devout than human at times. In many ways, she was the last of the tough breed that created the devout fortune. She could be demanding and unreasonable. Moreover, underneath her modern woman exterior lay a set of values from several centuries ago. I am very aware of how my mother can sometimes act in public, especially if she thinks her family is in danger. She probably just wants to make sure that your intentions for her granddaughter's future are in Tina's best interests. I'm sure that's it, but I'll tell you and her that I intend to be a big part of Tina's life from now on. I don't intend to replace Jason, but I am Tina's biological father, and I intend to take my place in her life. With that, he left without waiting for my answer. Of course, I didn't need the explosion that would occur if he said that to my mother, but I knew that Jack was a good lawyer and would be more charming in expressing his desires to my mother than he had just done to me. I decided to speak to my mother as soon as possible to prevent any friction, but unfortunately events moved too quickly for me, and I was grossly ignorant of some important facts. My first step in the Shivas case was to begin my investigation. We had a good firm of private investigators, and it didn't take them long to fill me in on the facts. Poor Dennis had 4 possible witnesses, 2 stockbroker friends who had accompanied Anton to the gym that night, and 2 women. He also approached many of the gym's regulars, but they rallied around the gym's owners and who they saw as one of their own. I want the names of women in particular, I told our private investigator. Dennis's preliminary witness list didn't include any women's names, and I was sure there was a reason for that. I soon recognized her when my investigator returned with the name of Letitia White, junior accounting officer. Anton was talking nonsense, egging on the old man. Anton brought his latest girlfriend, a married prostitute, to impress, Letitia said. I was only there because my boss was going, and he knew I dated a boxer in college. She frowned and said, You're a professional woman, and you probably know how these guys are always trying to get into your pants. He was trying to impress me by taking me to this boxing club to watch Anton beat some old boxer. I mean, wouldn't you love to see your old flame end up as the punching bag of some stock market idiot like Anton Shivas? I interviewed her in a nice bar on Maiden Lane. It was a stone throw from the New York Stock Exchange. She was quite frank, but I would never have called her as a witness for precisely the same reason that the plaintiff was afraid of her. Well, we got there, and I could see from the look this guy gave us that he wasn't some stupid bull that Anton was going to beat up. He was smart. You could just figure it out, and he was in great shape. So this new girlfriend of Anton's, I said, let me guess, she was a white woman and a little older than the rest of you. Yes, how did you guess? Luck, but tell me, how did the senior fighter react to it? He was completely professional. You know, he looked at us and probably thought what rich bastards we were. It couldn't help that Anton was talking nonsense and acting like a jerk. Can you tell me how Anton got hurt? I think when Anton lowered his guard, the white man just hit him. It was very fast, like the blink of an eye. I even felt happy for him. He was a good-looking older guy, too, Letitia said, and I could see she was downplaying her physical attraction to my husband. Well, thanks, I said. He'll be fine, right? I think Anton will recover, I said. Who cares about this asshole? I mean the old guy, he just did what he was paid to do. Please sit down, I said. Isn't this unethical? Jason said. I don't see why, I said with a grin. You will soon become my ex-wife, he said. Oh, have you filed for divorce? Well, no, I thought you would do this. After all, I left you. Dream on. You won't get rid of me so easily. I am your wife, and I intend to remain your wife, but now I am your lawyer. So sit down and listen. Jason wasn't happy, but he sat down. We were in a large conference room. I played all my cards. I set out to show my husband who's boss and why this is the right distribution of roles. Now let me tell you how I see it, I said. I had a yellow legal pad with notes and a claim with notes in the margins. It says here that you negligently caused harm to Anton Shivas, but we both know that it was not an accident. He walked into that gym with a married woman in his arms, and you did to him what you did to Frank Patterson, only more seriously. Oh, did I hurt your boyfriend? You know damn well you hurt him and could have killed him, and I probably would have killed that idiot Shivas if they hadn't stopped you. So let's call it what it was, a brutal attack by an angry husband, I said. Understand, these guys can destroy families, and there are no consequences for them. You are not a dark avenger. You are a mathematics professor and the father of 3 young women who need you. You act like an overgrown child, but you are a strong person and physically equal to a professional boxer. If the lawyer who filed this lawsuit finds out the truth, you could end up in jail. So I suggest you leave your anger at me and the world. I can get you out of this, but we need to work together. Then I'll leave you alone. I will not divorce you, and I will fight any divorce suit you may have. But I will ask no more than to remain your wife and pray that you find it in your heart to forgive me. I could see him thinking and arguing with himself. My strategy was to be as close as possible in order to regain my husband's affections. The odds were on my side. In 70% of cases of female infidelity, couples stay together. In the 30% that don't stay together, it's because the woman is divorcing the man. Men rarely leave their wives just because of their infidelity. I knew my case was a little unique. My sins were long and numerous, but this also gave me an advantage. We had a long relationship, which until recently was very happy. We went through a lot together and were extremely close and happy. Money can't buy happiness, but the lack of financial stress has made our marriage easy. So our current problem was the first real stress our marriage faced. I knew Jason would only divorce me when he was angry. Just sitting opposite him, I felt the fire of his rage. I had truly betrayed him and deserved this reaction, but I was determined to mend my ways and make amends for the pain I had caused. I felt like I had the time because Jason didn't need a divorce, and I had the legal skills and resources to make any divorce difficult and protracted. Until another woman appeared in his life, I hoped that over time his rage would subside, and he would remember our happy marriage. "Okay, here we go," I said. "Have you ever had a professional fight?" There were 2 months left until Christmas. Our daughters have been urging Jason to come home and spend the school holidays with them before he leaves for his new job. I thought he was about to give up. As soon as I brought him home, I intended to seduce him. Sex with Jason had always been a mutual pleasure, more about fun than passion. I never needed to play all these women's games that you learn in your youth and master as you age. I was relaxed with my husband and felt comfortable. Looking back, I was too comfortable. I intended to show him something in the bedroom that he had never known. Now he saw me as a woman of easy virtue. Well, I'll show him what a woman like that can bring to his bed. But first I had interrogations regarding the claim. Dennis Hoop was a good lawyer, but he just wasn't on my level, and he felt it. Manny was the third person Hoop interrogated. He was a daring witness. He had been fending off Hoop's questions for about 2 hours when Dennis finally got to the point. "Hoop, why did you choose Mr. Sweeney to spar with Mr. Sheaves?" "Manny, I didn't choose anyone. Mr. Sheaves chose Jason from a list of partners and paid for the fight." "Hoop, did you consider it a fair match?" "Manny, of course not. Sheaves was bigger and younger. By all rights, this should have been a beating." "Hoop, then how do you explain what happened?" "Manny, well, I saw that Chavez wasn't holding his hands properly, and Jason was training pretty hard. You know, some old people overdo it to stay in shape. This is a case of one person being overconfident and the other underestimating himself, I guess." Dennis didn't believe it, and he had his own strategy. He was well prepared. "Hoop, you didn't want Mr. Sweeney on the list of sparring partners." "Why?" "Manny, he's 42. I was afraid that he would get hurt. These young guys can do some serious damage to an older fighter. They don't always know their strength or remember that it's just a sporting event." "Hoop, Mr. Silverman wasn't George Foreman at 45 when he beat 27-year-old Michael Moore for the heavyweight title." Manny smiled before answering. "Manny, I know George. He is a big and strong man. Sweeney was a light heavyweight fighting a bigger man. Sweeney had skill and experience, but lawyer, your client had power. He just didn't hold his hands." I almost laughed because my interviews with the guys in the audience told me that Jason was very fast, more ollie than Foreman. They all agreed that Jason lacked fire in his belly. Poor Anton gave him this fire, even if only for a few minutes. I decided to end this farce. Can we stop for lunch? And after that I would like to interrogate someone who I believe will be a hostile witness for me," I said very casually. Hoop was not deceived. "May I ask who?" "I have a subpoena for her, Rachel Weiss. Mrs., I believe, and an eyewitness." Hoop turned slightly green. I offered him lunch at a nice restaurant, where I pressed him. "Okay, you know who I got, and the impact she's going to have on the jury. Your guy shows up at the gym with another man's woman, a mother of 3. He's going to look like a real creep. He's getting in the ring with someone a weight class below him, whom he chose to spar because he is old and out of print. He then taunts his opponent. He wants to impress his girlfriend and his buddies. You can't know that. It's not me who's talking, but Miss White is the other witness you're afraid of. I have Manny who will say that your guy didn't hold his own and is to blame for his injuries. Letitia will say that he acted like an idiot, and Mrs. Weiss to make the jury hate your client. How much do you think your claim is really worth?" I saw Dennis blink. "Anton will need extensive cosmetic surgery and will never look the same again." "You think the jury will care when I put a housewife on the stand and randomly ask what her husband did that night? You can object, but not before I ask the question." "So Anton won't get anything?" "Didn't say that. The insurance company wants to avoid my fees, and well, let's be realistic, a miracle can happen. So before I rack up any more expenses, I'm giving you a chance to settle the case. Give me a number." 100,000 plus medical aid, he said. Be realistic, 25 plus medical care, not covered by his existing health insurance. 50, but Anton must agree. Okay, but we're staying here. If I have to go back, there's no deal, I said. Understood, but I can ask a question. Why are you in this little business? I just hope Sweeney ends up in my bed. Poor Dennis turned several shades of red. Jason, what do you mean? You want $87,000, I said. Very simply, the settlement is $50,000 and my fee is $37,000, which is a bargain all things considered, Mary said. I don't have that kind of money, and you know it, I said. Well, I guess we'll have to figure something out, she said. Okay, whatever you want. Christmas, our usual family Christmas. You won't be leaving for California until the new year starts anyway. So come home until you have to leave, and I'll be satisfied. I didn't trust her, but what could I do, and I wanted to be with my daughters for Christmas, especially Tina. I didn't want Tina to think that our relationship had changed, although it inevitably had. Okay, but on the condition that I come for the sake of my daughters. I consoled myself that Mary had handled the claim well. The matter was quickly settled, and I believed it was favorable. The idiot I fought with has hopefully learned his lesson. Manny allowed me to return to the gym, where I seemed to have gained little reputation. You would think that people would be afraid to spar with me, but it turned out the opposite. I found myself in high demand. It felt good, and within reason, it was a release for the anger I felt toward my wife and her many lovers. In my mind, they were all the same type, rich suits with big egos and no conscience. I thought about them when I was fighting, but I remembered not to let everything go to my opponent. I was in the ring with Alex Pasternak, a bond trader at Goldman Sachs. He was a light heavyweight in his early 30s and had been an amateur boxer for about 5 years. He was hoping to win his weight class at charity fights over the holidays and gave it his all against me. He was good, I'll give him credit, and he was a decent guy. Manny came over to watch our sparring. He stood at ringside and started shouting commands to Alex. Come closer to him. His arms are longer, Manny shouted. Alex followed orders well, and soon I began to retreat. See, he's all hype. Push him, Manny demanded. I had to give Alex a couple of hard hits to get him to back off a little, but he was persistent and kept coming. Okay, Manny said, that's enough for today. Jason, come to my office before you go. I showered, got dressed, and went into Manny's office. Come on, he said, leading us to the stairs to the upper floors. The second floor was half a fancy gym for aerobics and strength training. The other half was dedicated to women's boxing. Most of the women stayed on the second floor. There was a separate entrance and exit that women could use. Manny divided his establishment by gender without establishing any official rules. The second floor was much more crowded than the first. The women clearly liked that the men's boxing club was on the first floor, but they had a semi-private space on the second. As we walked towards the boxing area, I saw my daughter Tina. I didn't know she was there. I used to take her to the gym with me when she was little. Unlike my other daughters, she accepted this place. Tina trained with Lucy Parker, Golden Gloves top female middleweight. Having Lucy as her coaching coach indicated that Tina had made a serious commitment, and not just in terms of time and physical effort. This clearly meant significant expense. Does Mary pay the bill, or does Jack Cardigan? Hey, I said as I walked over to where they were training. Lucy was wearing gloves that Tina was punching rhythmically with her fists. Hi, Dad, Tina said with a smile with a hint of worry. Things have been strained between us for several weeks now. The word Dad was peppered in every other sentence she spoke to me. I understood her motivation. She was a smart girl and wanted to show me that I was still her father, despite what the DNA test might say, but her use of the paternal address only reminded me how things had changed between us. Are you boxing? I asked. Well, I'm trying. There's a boxing club at school, or there will be one from the start of next term, she said. I'm trying to get in shape for my weight class. Tina weighed 137 pounds, making her a light welterweight or welterweight, depending on how many divisions there were in a particular program. She was a short woman without much arm length, and although she was well built, She was not particularly muscular. Looking at her now with her dark hair and eyes, I could see that she could not be my daughter genetically, and I would say that she was a poor candidate for women's boxing. However, I said, "Good girl. Training is what makes the difference, and Lucy is a good trainer." "Well, she definitely has a fire for this sport," Lucy said. "Well, let's get on with it. Time is running out." Manny was standing next to me next to the mat that Tina and Lucy were using, and now he said loud enough for everyone around to hear, "Yes, a lot of young girls are starting to take up this sport. It's a shame we don't have a silver glove team for girls. But there is not enough money for training." Silver gloves are a junior version of the golden gloves. Typically, local gyms produced gold glove and even silver glove teams for men, but interest in women was limited at best. There was no shortage of young and even middle-aged female executives and professionals who took up sports as a form of exercise, but the amateur sports program required young women and girls willing to dedicate themselves to a rigorous training program. Lucy set a trap. "We could have a charity match," she suggested, "have half a dozen exhibition matches." "Yeah, but it would take someone to draw the crowd," Manny opined. "A few famous women might come, and there's this guy Crawford," Lucy suggested. Now Manny has set a trap. Crawford would be a real find, but he's still a light heavyweight, and who could he fight? It was a real surprise to me, but it seemed like they wanted me to fight Joe Crawford, who they called the Hammer. They all turned to look at me. They were waiting for me to say something. I knew Crawford vaguely. I saw him fight years ago with golden gloves. He recently returned from the World Games with a silver medal. He was good and getting better, or so I was told. He wanted to go pro, but there wasn't much money in being a light heavyweight. He needed to move up to heavyweight like Michael Spinks did, but they said he wasn't ready yet, and he wasn't offered a fight at heavyweight. They all looked at me, and I realized that they might have Crawford in their pocket. It made sense. I was known for hurting people in the ring, and that made me an acceptable, if not desirable, opponent for an exhibition fight. I could fight the Hammer and get beat up for women's boxing, or look them all straight in the eye and say no. Tina looked at me, and I could feel the pride she felt that I could have had a real fight. I was hesitant, but to tell the truth, I was ready for it. In a sense, I have been preparing for this for a long time. "Perhaps I could take the fight to the Hammer," I said. "I don't know," Manny said. "You sure are in shape and can throw punches when you have the fire, but Crawford is almost a pro." "I think he can," said Lucy. 7 rounds at the end of the card. So I agreed to meet the Hammer on December 30th. I started training with Manny and a second named Larry. I was living in my old house, but I paid my share of rent on an apartment in Queens until the end of the year. I spent a huge amount of time working out in the gym. I didn't think I had a chance of beating Hammer, but I was determined to go the distance, which in this case was only 7 rounds. I was in the ring sparring with Eddie Lopez, a welterweight who was lightning fast. He ran circles around me, but I held my defense well and looked for an opportunity to strike. "Hit him, for Christ's sake," Manny shouted from the ring at me. "He's not glass. He won't break." So I waited for my chance and gave Eddie a good shot, which he responded to with indifference. "Okay, that's enough of this. Give me half an hour on the bag, and we'll be done for today." With that, we paused practice, and I turned to Manny. Then I noticed a black girl standing a little to the side and behind. As I approached the ropes, she stepped forward. She was tall and attractive and vaguely familiar. "Hi, do you remember me?" she asked. "Not really. Did you have math with me?" "No, but having me sounds interesting," she said. "I'm Letitia. I was with Anton when you almost sent him to the canvas. I saw an advertisement that you were going to have a real fight, and I came to say hi and wish you good luck." "Oh, well, thanks," I said, and there was an awkward silence, as if she was waiting for something. "Listen, I was going to ask you out for drinks," she said, "but they told me you're in training. So how about dinner and iced tea?" "I'd love to, but I can't leave right away." "No problem. I'll wait and—" "See," she said, adding a sexual hint to the last word. Okay, I said, not knowing what else to say. We left the gym about an hour after I showered and changed. While I was in the locker room, she spent time chatting with the other boxers. She was talking to a few when I entered the main room. After leaving the gym, we found a table at an upscale delicatessen that seems to be on every third or fourth block of Manhattan. The food was only acceptable, but the seats were comfortable and my companion seemed more interested in me than in the treats. So, I felt sorry for this old boxer, and what I discovered is that he is a university professor. You deceived me. That's the reason why you're here, curiosity. Oh, I'm curious, but I already know a lot, she said with that mocking smile that I first saw when poor Anton was spread out on the canvas. As she ate her pastrami sandwich, she gave me a brief synopsis of my life as she knew it. She ended by saying, currently going through marital problems and looking to move to Northern California. You know me better than I know myself. This is my job. I am a researcher. We are called analysts, but my forte is finding facts, especially those that companies want to hide. So you know everything about me, and I know nothing about you, except that you have terrible friends. Oh, it's a rookie mistake to judge by one incident. It also upsets me that you think of my friends like that. Anton and his company are business partners that I have to put up with. The usual male nerds who populate a brokerage company. Sorry, you're right, you shouldn't jump to such conclusions, but you still only told me about your work and nothing more about yourself. Well, let's see. I was born in Brooklyn 27 odd years ago and attended Erasmus High School and then the University of Pennsylvania. I have a BA in history and an MBA from the Wharton School. I've been working at Merrill for the last year, technically in the same work group as Mr. Shiva's, but he's a few levels above me. My boss was the short guy who was with us when you dealt with his hero Anton. He heard a rumor that I have a soft spot for boxers, she said with a grin as she remembered. You seem to like Anton's fate. As I told your wife, Anton got what he was looking for. Was the beautiful blonde lawyer I was talking to your wife? Yes, most likely, I replied. That's a shame, she muttered. What? It's just that, for such a highly educated person, you show poor judgment. But I think it's all that boxing testosterone that's clouding your brain and making you an easy target for. She stopped before finishing her sentence. Go ahead, say it, you prostitute, I said, suddenly angry, but more at myself than at the young woman opposite. Sorry, I was going to say slutty woman, but since we know she's also a lawyer, another word would do, she said, bursting into laughter. I couldn't help but smile despite myself. What do you want here? I asked. What can't I get from all those muscular young guys at your gym? And what is it? I asked. A real man in my bed. Someone who can take a beating in the ring with the hammer. I may not last long against Joe Crawford. Please, you are Killer Sweeney, as they say, the professor of chaos, or as the advertisements say. I couldn't help but laugh because the ad promised so much more than I could deliver. What if I don't live up to my hype? I asked. Well, then I'll have to take you for a trial fight, she said with that seductive grin. An hour later, we were in bed in my room in Queens. Sorry, I need to pee, she said. Where's the bathroom? Down the corridor, first door on the left. You walk past the living room to get to the bathroom. The moment after Letitia left my bedroom, I heard several cries of surprise. Apparently, the women returned home while we were sleeping. These surprised exclamations were overshadowed by Letitia, who said, "Oh, hi, just on the way to the bathroom." Moments later, Letitia returned. By this time, I turned on the light and found that she was completely naked when she entered the bedroom. She closed the door tightly and said, "I'm afraid I've shocked your neighbors." I'm sure so, I said, pulling her back into bed with me. "Oh, Professor, haven't you had enough?" she said in a way that made it clear that she was excited at the prospect of another round. For my part, I was prepared for this and hoped that she would be noisy enough to make it clear what was going on behind the closed bedroom door. Hopefully, with Latasha's help, I can gain some male reputation. You really know how to get the best out of a man, I said. It helps when you have an audience, she said. It really gets me going. You know that they are all gay women, I told her. She just laughed and said, trust me, white boy, those white girls got turned on and turned green with envy. We spent the night together, and when I woke up in the morning, I was alone in bed, but I could smell fresh coffee. I found Letitia chatting in the kitchen with Colleen. Good morning, stud, Letitia greeted me. Good morning, Professor, Colleen said quietly, looking into her cup of coffee. After an awkward moment, Letitia stood up, and after taking the last sip of her coffee, she told me, sorry, I can't stay for morning love, but I have to go. With these words, she kissed me on the cheek and headed towards the door. Colleen also stood up and, pouring coffee, handed it to me. Our eyes met for a moment, and I saw a suppressed smile in her eyes. She leaned in and whispered, if I had known you were so hot, I might have tasted you too. I took the coffee to my bedroom where I sipped it while I got dressed. When I was fully dressed, I quickly left. I needed to go back to my former home to shower and change for work. I expected the Manhattan apartment to be empty when I arrived because Mary would have long since left for work, but there sat a clearly angry Mary sitting in the living room. I used the guest bedroom. I headed there to take a shower and change for work. I expected to have some privacy, but she followed me into the room. Can I ask where you've been? Spent the night in my room in Queens, I replied. One, the question seemed to hang in the air. I saw no reason why I should answer it. My silence itself was the answer. Mary turned to leave, but as she did so, she said, I hope you were at least discreet. This thought had never occurred to me, and I realized that Letitia was far from discreet. Sorry, I said, we didn't think to hide. I could see how this confession hurt her, but I couldn't understand why. I never considered my wife a hypocrite, but her pain from my actions yesterday seemed to me the height of hypocrisy. Mary, it didn't surprise me how much my husband's infidelity hurt me. This was an unexpected development considering Jason is not the type of man to chase women or have success with the opposite sex. However, there's no denying that he's attractive, and even more so now that he spends all his free time at the gym. I thought his time at the gym was an excuse to avoid me and the problems in our marriage, and I was sure that being physically and aggressively exercised helped him cope with negative feelings. However, shirtless, covered in sweat, and throwing punches at another man, he was even more attractive to a certain type of woman. I recognized Letitia White as such a woman at first sight. As they say, a fisherman sees a fisherman from afar. Letitia was manipulative, sexually aggressive, and prone to using and discarding men without any remorse. Moreover, she was smart, and I suspect, the type who carefully plans ahead. She was very similar to me. I was afraid that we differed only in skin tone and age. She was young, too young for my comfort. Letitia was spotted with Jason for most of November. They were in the gym together, where she watched him train for an exhibition fight with Joe Crawford. They were seen in prestigious restaurants, where she paid, and in small cafes and bistros, where my husband paid the bill. However, what was much more disturbing was that they were often seen spending the night together at his room in Queens or at her place in Carroll Gardens in Brooklyn. I decided to meet with her, hoping to put an end to all this before everyone I knew found out that my husband was cheating on me, and before the situation got out of control. Well, you came quickly, she said. I sat across from her at the Starbucks next to the Merrill office. She visited this place several times a day. Once in the morning and once after lunch. She sat down at a corner table and worked from her laptop. Were you expecting me? Of course, once I started winning over your husband, I knew you would show up, she said with a grin. I believe your bull is my husband, Jason. Well, maybe bull isn't quite the right word, because he's a real bull in bed. She said this, barely looking up from her laptop. I leaned forward, closed the laptop lid, and said, I hope I'm not intruding, but we have an important issue to discuss. And what is it? Your intentions regarding my husband. Oh, that, she said. I intend to marry him. I like boxers, but I want a man with a profession that doesn't involve getting beaten half to death from time to time. Teaching is the best. They have a lot of free time. Jason would be perfect for my needs. You don't think his marriage to me is a problem? No way. It's just a slight delay. I have so much more to offer. I'm young, better in bed, and I'm not a woman of easy virtue. Are you sure about that last one? Absolutely. I may enjoy sex, but I'm not a promiscuous person, and I've never used my charms to get ahead. We both know you can't say the same. Simply put, you don't deserve a good man like Jason, and I deserve it. 99% of the men in this world are assholes. Jason, being in the worthy 1%, deserves something better than a woman of easy virtue as a wife. Finishing her tirade, she opened her computer again. Well, I said, getting up to leave, this woman of easy virtue has never given up without a fight. See you in the ring. Everything was much more serious than I thought. This bitch was out to take my man, and, to be honest, she had every chance of succeeding. The only real advantage I thought I had was Jason's long-standing love for me and my love for him, despite all my sins. What I needed to do was remind him of this before Letitia could ruin our connection. I had only one idea, and it was dangerous from any point of view. However, before I could begin to implement my plan, Jack Cardigan came to me. "We need to talk," he began in a very dark tone. We were not in the office. He intercepted me near our building. He must have been waiting for me. "Okay, how about some coffee?" I suggested. "No, we need privacy. My limousine is parked around the corner. I'll take you home." Once we were in the limousine, he closed the window between us and the driver after instructing him to drive one lap around Central Park before taking me home. When the window was completely closed, I said, "Jack, you're making me nervous." He looked at me for a minute and then began his story. Times weren't easy when I graduated from law school. I struggled. Volunteered for Vista at legal aid offices in East New York. That's all I could get. I didn't go to a prestigious Ivy League like you. I wasn't from a rich family. I needed a real legal job, but no one wanted to hire me. Anne worked as a teller at the old Irving Trust Bank. She was a beautiful woman. Let's just say she was young and attracted the attention of an older man. This man was Edward Kincaid SR, the father of the current governor, the same one. He was a member of the bank's board. One day, he was touring the main branch in Manhattan when he stopped to talk to Anne. 2 days later, a bouquet of roses appeared. The elder Kincaid was a little old. Lech had one thing going for him, and he suggested that my wife wasn't that kind of woman, or at least that's what I thought. But she knew how much I wanted a real legal job. So she gave the old bastard what he wanted, I interjected. Yes, and I didn't find out about it until I started working at his big law firm on Wall Street. The rumors started on my first day, and a week later, I knew what my wife was doing that evening when she came home late and stated that the shortage required a complete overhaul. I think I was just hurt, like Jason. "Sorry, Jack, but why are you telling me this?" "It's an excuse for what comes next. You see, I had no choice. I had no intention of leaving this company. At best, I would always be an employee, and I had no idea what would happen when the great Kincaid got tired of having sex with my wife. You see, I had to take my chance when it came." "I don't think I want to hear what happened next," I said. "Oh, but you have to. This affects you as a partner in this firm. You should know this because it concerns you as a partner in the firm. I took on the case of a young man arrested for assaulting a priest. During the investigation, it turned out that the priest was the criminal, and the young man was defending the alleged victim. I could make it public, but made a deal with the church's lawyer, our late senior partner Sidney Tweed, who offered me a promotion. I agreed and prepared documents against Edward Kincaid in case the case came to light. Now your son-in-law, who was once a victim, has also become dangerous, and he has these documents." "What does he want?" I asked. "Not him, your mother. She has a copy of the file. She knows everything. She's blackmailing us." I had to stop and think. I knew my mother could be ruthless. It was a well-known DeVoe trait, but blackmail? I do not believe in that. He just sighed and said, "She told me that I would never see Tina again, otherwise she would expose not only me, but also the firm's involvement in the Fitzgerald-Sullivan case, as well as the firm's involvement in other cases. We'll go broke. You will be ruined. And my failure won't matter, because then I'll have to come home and take over the company when Dad retires." A desirable result from her point of view. I had to give my mom credit. It was a well-played hand. My father could not continue any further. I helped my sister Susan get pregnant and referred her to the best fertility doctor in the country. Now my little sister was pregnant with not one, but 2 boys. However, it will be a long time before they can take over the DeVoe empire. She needed a temporary replacement. Catherine is a DeVoe first, and a mother and a person second. She could forgive a man for drunkenness, debauchery, and gambling, but never for sex with another man. I had known for years that my brother John's coming out of the closet had been a blow to her, but I could not understand the resentment she harbored toward her own son. I knew she still loved him, but now I was sure that she would never accept his sexuality. So apparently the family had no son to take over the family business, leaving everything to Susan's daughters and me. I couldn't imagine Susan interfering, and as provider of the male heirs, she fulfilled her duty to the family. No, I saw that my mother intended to force me into the family business. Now more than ever, I needed to get Jason to take me back and take me away. I could have been a woman of easy virtue, but I was his woman of easy virtue, and from that moment on I would belong to him, and to no one and nothing else. So, it's time to give myself completely to the prostitute's ploy to get him back and save my soul into the bargain. "Thank you, Jack, for being honest with me. At least for the first time," I said when we arrived at the door of my house. And leaving, I said, "In the morning you will receive my letter of resignation from the company. Good evening." "What? Can't you be serious?" he said as I slammed the door in his face. The Crosstown Boxing Club was not the kind of place where women were usually present. The gym was technically owned by a corporate entity, but the ultimate owner was Felix Wright, a real estate developer. I knew him through his representation in my company. I never represented him myself, but I met him at several events organized by the firm for clients. Felix was more than happy to show me around the place he called his second home and show me the star Joseph the Hammer Crawford. When I met this man, I discovered that he was more than I expected. Although he was no taller than my husband, he had a massive build from huge shoulders to a barrel chest. He was in the exhibition ring they had prepared for his training. There he sparred with a group of large men. "He'll go far," Felix Wright said, standing next to me as I watched the Hammer spar with a much larger man. "He's handsome, of course," I said, "but can he hit?" My comment was not idle. The nickname Hammer seemed to be a manifestation of reverse psychology, like calling a tall person short. There was no doubt that Joe Crawford was fast on his feet and probably a very skilled boxer, but I boxed enough while married to Jason to know how hard they could hit. "He's reserved with his sparring partners," Felix reasoned, "but you're right, with his chiseled appearance and fair skin, he's a real devil to the ladies." Joe Crawford was very handsome for a man of African heritage. The charity match for the women's silver gloves was billed to feature 2 light-skinned light heavyweights, although I suspected Joe was a little above that class at the moment. As if reading my thoughts, Felix said, "He's got youth, at 27, skill, muscle, and a weight advantage. The only thing your old man has is reach." It was true. Although Crawford was proportionally built, my husband looked like a monkey with short legs and long arms. However, I was afraid that Jason might have another advantage. He might hit harder if my plan worked. It was a desperate plan, but the only one I could come up with. I was going to make Jason so jealous that he would want me back. The problem was that any ordinary man I used as bait would be in danger. Poor Anton Sheaves has already proven how dangerous my husband can be. Hammer was supposed to be my new love interest. He didn't have a current girlfriend. According to my research, he had a bad breakup with a woman in college, when he decided to pursue boxing instead of pursuing a master's degree in education. My plan was to seduce Mr. Crawford and do it in a very public way. Jason was currently having sex with that witch Letitia every chance he got. She tried to let as many people as possible know that she was with him. It was as if she wanted the whole world to know. The only thing I was worried about right now was whether the so-called hammer could make my husband jealous without hurting himself or hurting Jason. Damn, I muttered, if only he could hit. What? Felix asked. Please introduce me to this great man. I am simply fascinated, I said. Jason. The fight that I had to fight seemed to hang over me for an eternity, but in reality a little more than 2 months passed. It was a wonderful time and a terrible time. It was terrible because of how hard the training was, but it was great because my daughter Tina and I overcame the revelation of her true paternity, which threatened to tear apart our father-daughter relationship. The Cardigans, Jack and Anne, suddenly disappeared from Tina's life. They left for their ranch in Montana just after Thanksgiving, and she hasn't heard from them since, despite leaving holiday messages on Facebook, email, and text messages. The disappearance of the Cardigans was good for my relationship with my daughter. She was with me during the long and difficult training sessions that Manny arranged. Tina also knew how to soften the blow of her mother's latest outburst. Mary began dating my adversary Joe Crawford in a very public way. Look at this prostitute, Letitia said, pointing to a photo on the back pages of the New York Post of Mary Singleton in a very revealing dress hanging from Hammer's arm. We were together at the ringside for sparring while I waited for the next victim, who was supposed to be my opponent. Letitia seemed much more upset about the developing Singleton-Crawford romance than I did. I dated Letitia for 6 weeks, and the sex was hot and passionate, but everything else about the relationship was lukewarm. This woman was very reserved and calculating. I didn't want to admit it, but the person she reminded me of most was my wife. Letitia didn't talk much about her job or her past life, which, given her 27 years, wasn't, I realize, particularly long. However, some things slipped through from time to time, and I realized that I was not the first man to play in the scenario of a white master and a black slave in her bedroom. However, something told me that there were few of them before me, perhaps only one. She's just doing this to get a reaction out of me, I suggested. I'm only worried about what she's planning in the end. Do you think she's using Joe? Letitia said with furrowed brows. Joe? I asked. I knew him once in passing, she answered with a shrug. When? I asked. What? When did you know him in passing? I asked. In college, that was a long time ago. Let's see, will it only be 5 years? I asked, pointedly. 7 if I counted, she replied, which I don't. Before he went to the Olympics, he became a boxing failure. The last words were spoken with a tone of contempt that we usually reserve only for the actions of those we truly care about. Well, I have to go. See you later, she said, quickly kissing me goodbye. Tina walked over and watched Letitia's hasty exit from the gym, saying, There's something wrong with that woman. Yeah, she thinks too much and always gets her way, I said, leaving aside the fact that Letitia was just like Mary, and just like my wife, Letitia loved to be dominated in the bedroom. More like a mom, my perceptive daughter observed, You really know how to choose. And it was true, although I never understood women in my life. I was still trying to make sense of it all when I found myself sitting in the makeshift dressing room outside the box at the old arsenal. This was the place chosen for the fighting. The women fought first and occupied the best dressing rooms, leaving me and Joe, as I now thought of him, a place to change in makeshift conditions. There was a partition between us, but you could hear what was happening on the other side if you spoke loudly enough. But there was silence on both sides of the partition until the women entered. I heard Mary's voice on Joe's side as Letitia walked in on me. Oh, honey, I've missed you so much this week. I can't wait for this fight to be over so I can make love, I heard my wife say. It's amazing how they let prostitutes in here, Letitia began in a loud, clear voice. But I think that's the only kind of woman that loser fighters can get, she continued. Letitia, is that you? cried Crawford from his side. Did you hear something, Professor? Letitia said, but too loudly to just talk to me. Looks like you have an audience on the other side of the partition, I said. Don't pay any attention to the easygoing woman, said Mary. She can't give you half the pleasure that I can. She's probably right, Joe. She has experience, if you don't mind her saggy white ass, Letitia almost screamed. At that moment, Manny came in to kick Letitia out. On the other side of the partition, Manager Joe did the same to Mary. Then we were prepared for battle. I went out first since my club was the host, or so I was told. But I suspect the real goal was to allow true pro-Joseph, the Hammer, Crawford to make a grand entrance, which is exactly what he did. The first 3 rounds were an excellent display of technical boxing. We both threw a few punches, but nothing else happened. If we fought at the World Games or Olympics, I would give every round to Crawford. He was the best fighter, but the crowd of 5,500 gathered at Arsenal was disappointed. They came to see the spectacle, but for now they only saw just a fight. For my part, even though I was in the best shape of my life, I was sweating like a pig. It was hot in the ring under the lights, and Crawford was very fast. It was more than just training to keep up with him. And then it happened. Midway through the 4th round, the Hammer slipped. His foot landed on a patch of our shared sweat in the ring. He was moving backwards to avoid the blow I was throwing when his foot slipped, and he fell forward onto my fist. Joe and I fought with 10-ounce gloves and no helmets, which resulted in a cut in my eyebrow. After a hard hit, I was able to stun Joe and send him to his knee, but the referee stopped me. Between rounds, our wives kissed us to the delight of the crowd, which made Joe even more furious. In the 5th round, he began to fight without technique, trying to defeat me at any cost. 2 women who are too similar to each other hatch a similar plan to get what they want. Unfortunately, these plans intersected in the ring, where I found myself with a crazy young fighter intent on killing me. Luckily, I remained calm and continued to throw punches. Joe, on the other hand, lost his head and started attacking my body. For the rest of the 5th and 6th rounds, my distraught opponent did everything possible to win. At the end of the 6th round, I was in my corner when Lucy, the referee, walked up. "Are you continuing?" she asked. "Yes," I answered, even though Manny shook his head at the fool that I was. The referee took one last look at me and said, "I think you're both crazy. You've got both of his eyes almost closed, and he won't give up either." The Hammer had a strong head, but the referee was right, he could barely see me. I decided the best strategy was to stay out of his reach. It was obvious that Olympic Joe Crawford had reappeared in the 7th and final round. I was exhausted and easy prey for this fighter who pushed me around the ring, but never landed any punches to the body. The technical fighter showed up again and managed to knock me down right before the bell. I was getting up to the count of 7 when the bell rang. Lucy raised Joe's hand in victory, and he hugged me, whispering in my ear to stay away from his woman. The crowd was on their feet, cheering. They saw more combat than they expected. The ring soon filled with all but 2 of the women who had fought that night, who began fighting at that point. The fight started in the aisle next to my corner. 2 women, one black and one white, were fighting each other. As one viewer noted, a real old girl's fight. The winner was obvious. Letitia eventually knocked Mary down and told her, "Keep your slutty white ass away from my man." Letitia then rushed over to Joe, who was leaving the ring looking like a man who had lost the fight. As she helped her nearly blind man out of the ring, she looked at me and waved goodbye with a grin. One shrewd woman got what she wanted, but what about the other? "Are you satisfied?" I asked, leaning over the ropes to look at my wife still sitting on her ass. "You almost killed both Joe and me." "It wasn't just me, obviously," she said, smoothing out her too short skirt as she rose to her feet. I started laughing despite myself. "What's so funny?" she demanded. "You're wearing that outfit with a black eye." "Oh no," she said, touching her eyes. "Is he really like that?" "It will be," I said. "We'll get an ice pack at the hospital." "Hospital for an eye?" "No, because of my broken ribs," I said. "About," she exclaimed, running towards the ring and rummaging through her purse. "I'll call an ambulance." "All you need is transport. Call one of those limousine services you use. The champion must go out in style," I stated. "But you lost," she said, helping me through the ropes and down to the arsenal floor. "Really? Did you see the other guy? I was tricked." Now it was her turn to laugh as she threw my left arm over her shoulder. Suddenly Tina appeared with my robe and threw it over me, standing under my other arm. "I already have a car waiting for us. Just come here," Tina said. And so my wife and daughter helped me walk away from the most important fight of my life. It was an experience I would never want to repeat, but would never miss. I was in terrible pain, but happier than ever. The hospital significantly reduced my enthusiasm. "I thought I got the best part of the deal," said the young female Dr. Lester, crossing her arms. She was a young woman who looked quite attractive in her white robe. However, her disapproval made her look stern. "You have 3 broken ribs and no damage to your lungs as far as I can tell, but we'll keep you overnight to make sure. Your friend in the next room may be losing his sight, and I'd say you're both lucky idiots." "What's that?" you thought. "They didn't think so," Tina said. "It was supposed to be an exhibition fight for charity, but things got out of hand when the prostitutes got involved." This brought the first smile I saw on Dr. Lester's face. "Don't say such things about your mother," I warned Tina. I saw how the word "woman of easy virtue" hurt Mary, said by her daughter, but the doctor was unperturbed. "I don't know," the doctor said. "It seems like if they were a lady, they wouldn't be hanging out with you or needing eye treatment." Letitia and Joe beat us to the hospital, and in addition to Mary's black eye, Letitia also had a black eye. The doctor left, saying that he would arrange for me to be transferred to a ward. I sent Tina to get some coffee while we waited. "So what now?" I told Mary. "It doesn't depend on me," she said. "I'm a woman of easy virtue, remember." "I'm leaving for California next week," I said. "I guess so am I." "I didn't invite you, and aren't you giving up too easily about Joe?" I asked. "We never slept together. He was in training, as he said. Let that bitch Letitia take him. So I'll go whether I'm invited or not." "What about your law firm?" "I quit. I couldn't stay anyway. My mother was blackmailing Jack Cardigan with some files she got from my brother. She said he'd never see or hear from Tina again, or she'd make it public. I won't tell you what's in it, but I'm done with this legal garbage." "I didn't know your mother was capable of this. Can she do this, and what will Tina do?" "It's not up to Tina. Mom can be very cruel when it comes to family, and she has Jack's head in a noose. I'll come with you to California with our daughter. I don't want that anymore." "Do you think you can live like a housewife?" I asked. "Yes, if you can put up with the fact that I don't know how to cook or clean." "Well, I think you can come with me. Tina will teach you how to cook. I already taught her, and we can hire a cleaning service once a week." "Are you serious? Can I go?" "Yes, but I still consider you a woman of easy virtue." "It's okay, I'll be your woman of easy virtue," she said and went to hug me, but stopped, remembering my ribs. She leaned over and gave me a kiss that was such that Tina, returning with a tray of coffee, saw us. "Does this mean we're all going to California?" she asked. "Yes," I answered. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.